I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
to have a quorum. Have a motion to adopt the agenda unless there are any changes.
Yes.
I would like to pull one item from the consent agenda, A1D1, the Baker Donelson contract.
Anything else? Get a motion to approve with the said change?
I move to approve with the change.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Okay. All right. I'll take that as a yes. Oh, look, we get to go straight into public participation. All right. The board's now hear from those persons who have requested to appear. Are we gonna get a list up? Okay, thank you. Appear at this board meeting in the interest of time, speakers are requested to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Do we have a timer? You're the timer, or is that, hey, we got a timer, the clock is up here, it'll be up here to your right. You have 3 minutes, the names are up on the screen. So, first person, let's go. Mr. Hunt, Ms. Smith, Jack. So as you see your name, just come on up, okay?
Hi, good evening. Thank you guys for allowing me to come and speak to you all. My main reason for being here today is to kind of, I guess, discuss what my concerns or feelings are with Knowledge Academies, because I know that's been a concern of the board, and I know that you guys probably have had conversations about Knowledge Academies. My daughter attends there. She's been there since it first opened, from 5th grade. She'll be graduating in 2020. So a lot of the issues with Knowledge Academies has been the issue with a lot of the parents. We're very supportive of the school, but we also want the school to thrive. So a lot of the problems that were brought up by parents. And we were thankful that the board took our concerns very seriously and were able to look into some of the things that were going on with Knowledge Academies. We wanted to stay, we wanted to thrive, because in our community in Antioch, and I've been there 10 years, moved from Mobile, Alabama, there's not a lot of options for our children. And so charter schools, when my child was getting ready to go to middle school, there wasn't a charter school there or another option. And the school that she was zoned to, I was not gonna let her attend that school because it was not a school that was thriving. And so in order for me to get a better education for my child, that would have meant that I would have had to drive outside of my community to go to another school or choose another option for my child, or private school. I don't think that should be options for people in our communities. We need to have schools that are thriving and schools that are doing well. And we want the Metro Board to support Knowledge Academies staying open. We don't want you to take away our educational options, because lots of our families, we can't drive outside of the community. We don't have the option to do that. So we want our neighborhood schools to stay open and to thrive, because that's what we trust in. We want educational options for our children. So we're asking, if the board does consider the vitality of Knowledge Academies, consider also the families that are in need of educational options in our communities. And we want those options to do well, so we want those schools to be supported, not necessarily closed down, but provided with some support to be able to sustain options for our families. And so I'm here today in hopes that you guys would consider that there are many, many families who need that school to stay open. There are many families who don't like what has happened to Knowledge Academies, just as there's families that don't like what has happened to many public schools. But there's not a lot of options, so they still continue to send their children there. So we are saying Knowledge Academies is probably not a lot different than a lot of our public schools. But in Antioch, we don't have many options. We don't. The schools are not thriving well like they are in other communities. So we're saying help us to make our educational options better so that our children and our families have those opportunities to stay in our community and provide education for our children. So if Knowledge Academies is a school that can stay open, we ask
Thank
you
you
to put
very
those
much for your
resources
comments. We
behind it.
appreciate it. Next, Miss Jackie, Miss Jackie. Yes, that's right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm Jackie Sissel. I'm going to talk really fast so I can get my time in. I'm Jackie Sissel. I serve as the community engagement person for Knowledge Academy, and I'm thrilled to be in this position. Matter of fact, we just hooked up a community partner today that's going to come and teach financial literacy to our kids. So we're getting ready for the fall season, and we're really thrilled about it. One of the parents asked me to have their daughter stand up, so Candace, stand up so they can see you. That's one of our kids, and we have 800 more that'll be coming on board August 5th, so we're really excited about serving them. We have over 800 students that will be coming to school this fall. They're already there, and we are a community. We're a collection of Antioch families that have exercised the school choice and have chosen KA. So we're asking, I'm with Dr. Sharon, we're asking for your support. We are thrilled about that school. We're planning to do great things there, and we need your support. Thank you.
Lewis?
Good evening. My name is Eric Lewis. I've recently been invited to be the Executive Director of Knowledge Academies. I'm honored to serve in that capacity. I'm honored to be able to meet you, distinguished educators and staff here with Metro Nashville Public Schools. I'm honored to serve the diverse community of parents to educate their children in the Antioch community. I've already been impressed by our parent engagement. I continue to be even tonight. It's overwhelming to be able to see how parents appreciate and support their children's education. That even during our summer months, we wanted to connect as a leadership team with families, and 300 students and their families have come out to registration nights to fill out boring things like paperwork and to meet with us even in these slow summer months that we typically experience in schools. They visited our campus and heard about the school, and we're extremely grateful. This level of summer engagement and maintaining our near 800 enrollment is extremely encouraging. We implement a proven continuous improvement model as our intent for KA as we come in as a leadership team. We intend to have a model for school and student success, and we're confident that our level of comparable performance to our neighboring schools in Antioch will begin to rise and meet pockets of performance like our high school science that consistently exceeds district averages. We have more to do. As a school that has ramped up in enrollment and growth since its founding a few years ago, we're in a position to turn individual student growth into school-wide success measures. I've led schools like KA in my career in the implementation of this model, and our leadership team, our faculty, and our staff anticipates a rise in student achievement at KA. With the level of parental engagement as displayed this summer, it stands to reason, and it stands the test of experience that students can and will rise to rigorous challenges of high expectations. KA possesses the required formula for parental choice in education, parental involvement, and an atmosphere of high expectations. These key pillars of continuous improvement and turnaround processes are proven and will present in the KA model the opportunity to allow experienced leadership in public charter and traditional public school settings to be able to lead a school. KA has been engaged with the district staff and the charter school office over the past few months. Our board and new leadership team have met with and submitted biweekly reports on leadership, culture, systems, instruction, and plans for this upcoming school year to be able to achieve positive student outcomes. Our current leadership is perfectly comfortable with this level of transparency and welcomes staff and board members alike to visit and engage with us as we educate and serve the families of Antioch. The KE leadership team looks forward to participating in the local training and district planning to advance opportunities for all students in our community. And I would like to extend my thanks to the leadership and staff of the Charter School Office for their professionalism and their school support services. We are grateful for the encouragement and feedback provided by them on our work thus far. Thank you again for your time, and thank you for the dedicated work of our parents, staff, and students.
Lee Donker? James Bristol?
Good evening, Board. My name is James Bristol. I'm the chairman of the board for Knowledge Academies. I'm also a practicing attorney at the law firm of Walter Lance and Dortch & Davis. And I got to this role as chairman simply because I wanted to do what all of you want to do. We need to have a good school system here in Nashville. We have a great city, and our school system needs to be improved. This is something I thought I could do to give some of my time, and I've given quite a lot of it, it's turned out, to try to just make a difference in an area of town, Antioch, that really needed some help. We started, got our first charter in 2011, and we got off to a pretty good start. Our first 5 years, I think the school operated quite well. Our academic scores were looking really pretty good. We started out with 5th and 6th grade. We had a 7th and 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and last year we had our first senior class that graduated. This year will be our second graduating class coming up. So we're proud of that record. We were also able to acquire our building through a bond finance that has really helped us in our cost of facilities. So that's been a real financial windfall for us. Unfortunately, and you've seen some of this, we came into realize in 2018 that our spending was not in line with our budget. And I and our finance committee spent a lot of time trying to find out how to get our spending back into line. We met with our director several times, many times, repeatedly, met with financial consultants to try to find a way to keep our budget on the straight and narrow. What we found was that we needed to replace our director, make a long story short. And that was very difficult. Mr. Fuller was our founder, very charismatic, and but a change has had to be made. To do this, we worked collaboratively with MNPS. Dennis Queen and his team met with me several times, and we had discussed, how do we move forward from here? We also talked with parents, some who were here tonight, and concluded that it was time to make that change, which we did. And we brought in the group Noble Education Initiative to assist the board in running the school. And NEI has got a track record that is second to none from what we could tell. I talked to the chairman of the Indiana Board of Education about their experience with Noble Education Initiative, and they had done a superb job in turning around some of the worst schools in the state of Indiana. And so we engaged with them in April, and since then we have worked collaboratively with MNPS to try to turn our situation around. We think we've got a good core, we've had a good history, and we believe that this next academic year will be off to a good start and be able to improve things. We think we have our financial ship in order completely. That part we think is fine. We'd like to see the academics improve, and with your all support and collaboration, we believe we'll be there as well. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Delana Claybrooks, and I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you and speak. Thank you so much for being willing to listen. I'm a product of Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools, graduating from Antioch High School in 2000. This will be my 15th year in education. I've had 14 years in traditional public schooling, and last year was my first in a charter school. I can say that although I loved going to Antioch High School, I would not send my kids to MNPS schools because of the current condition. I currently have 2 kids enrolled in private school, and when I came to Knowledge Academies, I didn't know much about the charter argument. I came, I was welcomed, we had about 300 high schoolers, and I can tell you from experience that when my kids are of age next year, I would be pleased to enroll them in Knowledge Academies because of what I've experienced as a teacher in the kind of learning environment. So what I can share with you firsthand is that we have several students who would not thrive in a traditional public school setting because it's easy to be overlooked, it's easy to be labeled as a troubled kid, and to receive disciplinary action and then start the pipeline system. I can tell you with firsthand experience, those kids who attend Knowledge Academies, not all of them are troubled, but we have a few who would not have been successful in a traditional school setting, and they thrive in that school setting. They know everybody, everyone is comfortable, they get along well with teachers, and so then as teachers we're able to mentor those kids a little more closely, seeing them every day, having the small intimate space. I will say too that they're allowed to be involved and that their voice goes a little bit further because of that small school environment. I think, so I'm a member of a lot of the Facebook groups, and what I've heard people say is that there needs to be oversight with knowledge academies. There has to be oversight with charter schools. And I will tell you that I agree with that. So, having 14 years of traditional experience, I can say that not everything I saw there were things that were kosher or things that should have been going on. But I can say that we do need more oversight, and I really believe that with NEI there, the things that they're bringing along, it's really going to make a difference for the community. I think that it would be short-sighted to close knowledge academies, saying that, money has been, misplaced, money has disappeared, hasn't been used appropriately, when if we're honest, those types of things also go on in the traditional school setting. The only thing is, there's the board to cover that up. So, should there be oversight? Should there be accountability? Yes. But to take away knowledge academies would be a disservice to the Antioch community. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak here. My name is Roy Renfro. You can call me Jay. I have the distinguished honor of being the longest-serving teacher in the history of knowledge academies. In 2013, I was one of the teachers that answered the call to work at Boys Prep Nashville, which, if you remember, was a train wreck of a charter school. We agreed to work there, and we were painted a picture of how there were promises of how we were going to turn around the school. And me and a lot of other teachers and a lot of families were roped into that vision, and we bought into it. And it was one of the most stressful and psychologically tormenting years of my life and of the students who were there. I say that because I see a similar situation before us here right now with Knowledge Academies and Noble Education Initiative. We're in the news just like we were with Boys Prep Nashville, and I'm hearing a lot of the same promises and seeing a lot of the same tactics, but this time far worse, manipulative. Let me paint you a picture of my experience with Noble Education Initiative. Back in April, about a dozen teachers were let go on the spot without reason or without explanation, disproportionately of them African American and Hispanic. I actually was the only the only white person let go, which led a lot of students to ask, well, why are they taking away all of our black teachers and replacing them with white people in suits? So a lot of teachers went to a board meeting after that, a Knowledge Academies board meeting, to ask, why were these people let go without any meetings held with the parents, with any meetings held with the teachers about who was certified and who was bought into the mission, and without any meetings held with the students. When we attended that meeting and we spoke our piece, NEI then proceeded to have a presentation where they assured the board that they had had these meetings with the teachers, with the parents, with the students, which was in fact false information that they were reporting to their board. Some teachers again spoke out, and one of those teachers was later met with by an NEI representative and told, "You like to argue, I can tell I'm going to have a lot of fun with you." That teacher, despite being a level 5 teacher for 2 years, was fired without reason on the last day of school. When pressed forward, and the other educator, a doctorate and a product of MNPS schools, the very person you want serving your kids, was also let go on the last day of school. When they asked, well, this seems like retaliation, can you point to any reason why you would let us go? And after providing some other legal pressure or threat of legal pressure, eventually they settled with other terms, and they decided not to terminate them on the last day of school. But it was retaliation. That is my experience with Noble Education Initiative. There are a lot of teachers here, but there are a lot of teachers not here. Those that Knowledge Academies thinks is returning, but they are in fact not returning, but they don't want to say so because they've seen how NEI tries to short people of what they owe them, and they see how they generally are not responsible, respectful people. I'm out of time, but I have other things to say, and I will remain in attendance to make myself available for questioning later on.
Thank you.
Good evening, board chair and fellow board members. My name is Brian Densmore. I'm the pastor of the church that's been meeting in Knowledge Academies, where the church has been in the paper. And so before everything happened, we were the ones that were having the relationships, making the checks, and so on and so forth. And we've been extremely pleased with the board's decision to go ahead and move forward and let the previous administration leave. And we've had no issues with the current administration. We've had a wonderful opportunity to talk, open dialogue, and all financial things have been on the up and up, receding and everything, so on and so forth. I'm also a leader in the community. I do leadership coaching, work with the hotels in the community, business owners, so on and so forth. And I really believe the Knowledge Academies is good for Antioch. It's good for the community. There's a lot of positive things out there. And we want to make Antioch proud. And for some reason, Antioch seems to be the one that gets the black eye, some of the bad press. And, you know, things happen all over town. But I've been very pleased with the open dialogues, the conversation, and so far our interactions have been very positive. And so I believe in the future, and I think it'd be a good thing for them to move forward right there where they are. Thank you for your time.
Charles Abbott. Scott Schumper.
Good evening, Board. My name's Scott Schumpert. I've been on the board at Knowledge Academies for over 9 years now. My regular jobs, I'm a partner in the Carr, Riggs & Ingram CPA firm here in Nashville. And I just wanted to come talk to you tonight, let you know that I'm passionate about education. I believe that's an avenue we can change lives in Nashville. And, you know, that's an option we need in the Antioch community. And I think it's going to help the community there. I'm just asking your support to continue to have that option in Antioch. Thank you.
Just a duplicate last name. Charles Abbott's name. That's okay. All right. Thank you. That concludes our public participation. Moving on to governance issues. Ms. Bucks.
All right, Madam Chair, I present to you the consent agenda as read. 1A, approval of minutes 6/25/2019 and 7/1/2019 meetings. 1B, recommended award of contract for parking lot addition at Cole Elementary School, Pride Concrete LLC. 1C, recommended approval of request number 1 for small scope projects at various schools, Johnson Alternative Learning Center, Case Restoration Company. 1D, awarding of purchases and contracts. 2, the Big Picture Learning DBA, Big Picture Learning. 3, Davis Demographics and Planning. 4, Donors Choose. 5, Noser Consulting LLC. 6, Snap Raise. 7, State of Tennessee Office of Criminal Justice Programs. 8, YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. And 1E, 2019-2020 MNPS Student Parent Handbook. I move that we accept the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I do have one question around the parent handbook. Are we making any alterations?
I don't know if we decided, are we going to go with the policy approach? I think we decided on policy.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
it's
just
going to
makes
go on
me
the
feel
policy committee.
Thank you. Then I'm
And I
ready.
have a question about the Johnson Alternative Learning Center. Will this include, I'm trying to remember if this is where we were at the graduation and had the steps issues. That's a different building, same building? That's a different building. The, was it Bass? You were with me. It was Bass. So it's not this building. That's a
No,
different building.
Johnson
Okay.
didn't have any stairs.
We'll get there. I'm looking forward to the one that says Bass Alternative Learning Center on here. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval of the consent agenda as read, raise your hands. It's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 2.
No, number D1, Baker Donelson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
building.
Thank you. Can we get a motion for item D1? We'll open for discussion.
I would like to move that we delay the vote on this contract until we can have an update from our attorneys on this case.
Second.
Okay, so your motion is to defer.
Is to defer the vote on this contract until we can have an update from our attorneys in executive session.
Okay, and there's a second. Are there any other questions or clarifying questions, or everybody know what she's talking about?
I do have a question. When would we have another session, and will deferring the vote cause any kind of backlog for us legally?
Yeah, so what is this current contractor to approve, and what's the consequences of deferral?
This contract is, related to the Baker Donelson contract that the board had asked for the BEP litigation. The current amendment, so if you recall, this was back in 2017, I think the board wanted to enter into Shelby County had started some litigation in MNPS. The board decided they wanted to go against the state related to BEP funding. The board hired Baker Donelson, and the litigation has been proceeding. This contract does nothing other than add new names. So under the original contract, we have set prices that we pay various attorneys. We have a reduced rate from what some of the Baker Donelson attorneys charge other people. And so this is to add some specific, they've had some staff turnover in the last few years, and there are new people working, and so this is truly just to keep everything the same, but to update the staff names of the people at Baker Donelson that might work on this BEP litigation on behalf of the Board of Ed. In terms of a deferral, I mean, obviously we want to get the amendment done as quickly as possible so that our language and our rates of pay are clear, so that we're not charged higher rates. But I mean, in terms of a deferral, I mean, again, the sooner the better, but there's no like specific timeline. Obviously, we can always get an update from Baker Donelson to come in. They will, of course, charge for that, which is fine. And so if the board is ready for an update, we can certainly ask for one. But again, this contract amendment should have, I mean, it is literally a substitute of attorney names based on the current attorneys working at Baker Donelson.
This doesn't, okay.
I just want to express what my concerns are. So this is a contract that we entered into 2 superintendents ago. It was under Dr. Register, and I believe it's our 3rd year.
I think it was under Dr. Joseph.
Was it?
This is the last one.
Okay, all right, so,
Yeah.
but so it's been, how long have we had it? 3 years?
Since 2017, so we're looking
Okay,
at 2 years.
2 years. And it's my understanding that we have paid $425,000 this year alone in legal fees, right? Is that correct?
It is going to be somewhere close to that, and I will say that actually is around the same proposed budget that they had proposed back in 2017, so.
Okay, and then the first year, do we know how much we paid? I mean, this is my question. I don't think we've had an update on this for about a year. I'm not sure. I think it was back last fall. And I don't know where we stand in the litigation. I've heard various things. It concerns me that it's an open-ended contract, which I guess we agreed to sign a couple of years ago. But it concerns me that there's no cap at all and that we have no idea how long this may take or the next steps. And I just think it would be prudent, particularly since it is an open-ended contract, just to get an update. We can do that fairly quickly so that we know what we'll be paying for.
I certainly think we
coming
can
up.
certainly ask Baker Donelson to provide an update. And then if the board at any time wants to request an executive session with Baker to have a more, in-person, more formal update, we can certainly do that as well.
Okay.
I don't, yeah, that's fine. Again, this contract is just to substitute names. In terms of the amount, the 400, I think it's actually $405,000, and that has been over the course of the contract. My understanding is that first payment was in December of 2017 until May of 2019. My understanding is it has been $405,000.
Okay. So that's a 2-year period, not just one. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
Bankston.
Ms. Harkey, just to clarify, I believe we voted in October 2017, and while the practical effect of the vote was to hire Baker Donelson, really what we were doing was joining the Shelby County litigation, which was ongoing, of which Baker Donelson were the lead counsel. So the decision on whether or not to move forward with Baker Donelson is really a decision on whether or not to remain with Shelby County in litigation, or go it on our own and start over, or do nothing. And furthermore, we're talking about, expensive legal fees for sure, but, we're also talking about BEP formula that's arguably $1 billion underfunded, of which our share would be about $80 million recurring. So yeah, it's expensive on a one-time basis. But I think if we're going to get into this conversation, I'm all for getting an update. I mean, my understanding is we're going to trial this fall, potentially.
Potentially, I know that the chancellor that was originally going to hear it has retired, and so they were working on getting a new one. I don't know if the new date with the new chancellor has been set or not, so certainly an update would make sense. And you are correct, Baker Donelson is the same firm that is handling the Shelby County BEP litigation case as well, and they had filed prior to this board's decision to join in that lawsuit.
And they've handled school funding cases in Tennessee going back to the 80s. And I guess the other question I've got is, I don't, look at the legal bills, and I haven't asked to see them, but I think it's fine for board members to review them. But I assume that if there were large bills this spring and we were getting into a trial this fall, that was associated with depositions, discovery, and all the very time-intensive things that you have to do to prepare for trial, right?
Quite possibly. I do know that every bill that Baker Donelson submit is an invoice of the work that they've done that shows the time spent and why they spent money on certain, or spent time working in certain areas. So related to depositions or getting ready for trial. Absolutely.
So I would support deferral for the purposes of getting an update. But again, if the conversation is to do Baker Donelson or not, the real conversation is, are we going to leave the Shelby County litigation or not? Fundamentally,
that would certainly
correct.
be something that the board would need to discuss as part of that conversation.
Yeah. All right.
Just to be clear, even if we do not approve item A1D1, we are still under contract with Baker Donelson. And we'll still be paying them for whatever work they do between now and the time we get an update.
That is correct.
Okay.
Again, this amendment was
One has
only
nothing to do with the other.
update the names.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the current term of the contract?
It's open-ended. That's what's
I
part
think
of
it
the
was
concern.
through the term of the litigation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Spearing?
So, let me see if I understand. This contract is to update the name Baker Donelson?
No.
Is this update?
The
So there's certain
attorneys associated with
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have, certain attorneys that work at Baker Donelson, we have, again, slightly reduced rates. And so for a named partner, we pay this amount per hour. And it literally names the attorney, all the way down to the associates and the paralegals. These would be the 10 attorneys working on the contract. This is truly just to update those names so that we know when Joe Smith is working on anything related to this BEP litigation, this is what we will be paying Joe Smith for his hour.
And would there be a problem with having parameters about the max amount of this contract, like most of our contracts? If not all of our contracts, don't we have a ceiling of how the contract can go?
Certainly, the board can discuss that. At this point, that would be an amendment to the contract, so it would require Baker Donelson's approval as well. Those are things that the board can discuss. When you're talking about litigation, part of it is you might not know how high the expenses are going to go, again, around certain timeframes preparing for trial. You might expect a pretty large bill. And so, yes, the board can try to initiate an amendment to the contract with a cap, but if you're wanting a firm to be able to just complete the litigation, it would also be fairly common to have the contract be open-ended related to the litigation.
I'm not saying that a cap would mean that we would never go above that, but it would take board approval to go above that. So I think that would be important. I would be in favor of that. I also know that we have other litigation with Baker Donelson. Is that a separate contract?
That is a separate contract.
Okay. I would be in favor of hearing an update before we move forward. Thank you.
I just want to make sure we're clear. We can still approve this contract because it's simply changing who can basically touch our casework, so we can continue to move forward, but still have the meeting to go over everything.
Yes, that is correct. We could still, the board could still approve this amendment, and certainly we could still have an update.
And then additionally, we could do all the other things that we're discussing.
Correct. Again, this amendment is only to change names, update the people that are currently working at Baker Donelson.
So just to be clear, and I just want to say this again, deferring, approving, taking Attorney Sharon Gentry off and replacing it with Attorney Jill Spearing is not going to stop them from billing us. It's not going to stop them from working. So we're not stopping anything by deferring this. And we can always get an update, just that one has nothing to do with the other. So approving them to be functional, what we're doing is So let's just assume that two of these attorneys are either have become partners, and so their rates are higher, right? So if their names stay, I mean, we run the risk of a higher rate because they've been promoted to partner. They're now a senior, whatever. So what they're trying to do is replace people who are in line with the rates that we agreed to. Okay? So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
That is correct.
Okay, so again, deferring approving to change one or two names of attorneys who are working on the case does not prohibit us from getting an update, nor does it stop us from getting billed. So I don't know why we're holding this hostage.
So here's my concern. We are approving a contract for another open-ended contract, and I just want, and I probably voted for the open-ended contract the first time, but I'm concerned since we are paying such a large amount of money, I think it would be responsible to have the conversation. I don't want to delay it long-term. I did not realize until tonight that this is about the names of the attorneys, but once we've approved this, and y'all correct me if I am wrong, once we've approved this, this is our new contract. Whereas if we were to, right, new people.
But the contract, if we don't do anything, we still have a contract, is what I'm saying.
Right, but if we were to try, the next time, if we were to defer, get the update, maybe set some parameters on when we'll have reports to the board before we spend more money, and I don't think anybody's talking about pulling out of the BP lawsuit or the partnership with Shelby County. If we were to make those parameters, we would need to do that at the time we approve this contract. Am I correct about that, or am I wrong?
Well, no, what I'm saying, I don't think you're correct, but you can jump in. We could always put that contract back on the consent agenda at the next board meeting if we discuss and want to make some changes. That, again, we can change the terms or renegotiate the terms at any time. This is just to change the people who are currently approved to work on the case.
Correct. We have a contract that's currently in place. And regardless of a passing of this amendment or further discussion, we have a contract that's in place with Baker Donelson to provide legal support, legal representation for our BEP case. This amendment is just to change names. Any other discussions or any other terms that the board wants to add, any of those would either be an additional amendment, or we would have to renegotiate those terms with Baker Donelson, and potentially create either a new contract or an amendment to our current contract that's in effect.
So, okay, so my question then is, what do we have to do if we decide that we want to change the parameters of the contract? Is there a notice provision? Or we just can decide at any time to amend the contract?
We would, if we're going to amend the contract or enter into different terms, we would have to negotiate that with Baker in terms of how that would happen, and probably come back for a board vote after the board has discussed that. There's also termination provisions in most of our contract. I have to admit, I'm not ready to speak to what those are, but those are normal things that we'd have. So if the board wanted to talk about termination of the contract, that is the board's prerogative. But if there's going to be a change to the terms, we would either have to terminate the contract, or we would have to renegotiate and get Baker to agree to those terms.
I think specifically for Ms. Froge's question is, what are the mechanics of that? Is that an executive session? Is that a committee meeting? What's the process for the board to come together and say, hey, I'd like to see in writing that we get quarterly written and verbal updates on what's going on with the litigation. I want to be able to make sure that copies of whatever it is. What is the mechanics of getting that discussion and then turning it either into and then getting the amendments baked into the current contract?
What I would like to do is suggest that we start with an update, and then from there, after the update, the board can determine what direction they want to go.
And so that's an executive session.
The update would be an executive session, and then we can go.
And then we can go into a committee meeting after that to discuss.
And then that committee meeting could absolutely be an open meeting where the board could discuss any changes to terms.
Gotcha. Good? Does that work? Okay. Anything else?
I would just say there's nothing to stop any individual board members from looking at the contract, sending thoughts to Ms. Harkey and Metro Legal, who then can communicate those up the line to Baker Donelson to so we're not all sitting around waiting for a committee meeting. I mean, I think, we've all got a hand in this, and I just encourage anybody to, work it through the proper channel with legal, because it's fundamentally a legal issue. So that's all.
Would you like to keep your motion?
Let me just ask one last question. The only change is to the names of the few attorneys listed on the consent agenda, correct? So make sure that's what we're voting on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it is changing the number. So it's an amendment to change the compensation section of the contract as requested by Baker Donelson and the Metro Department of Law. And then on your update, it shows you the very specific names with the hour rate that we want to change the contract to show these names.
Okay. All right, well then I will withdraw my motion and I will move to approve this contract as written on the consent agenda, but I would like to have an update in the near future.
Keep the motion clean. The motion is just to
Okay.
approve.
Withdraw my original motion.
Okay.
I now move to approve the contract as written on the consent agenda.
There's a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval of the contract? Raise your show of hands. Okay, it's unanimous. And so we just need to plan, we don't have another meeting this month, but if you guys feel the need to have that before the August meeting, can you wait until the, okay, so if we can do an executive session prior to the August meeting? Thank you. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys, that was fun.
Resolution.
Okay, resolution, it's all yours.
Okay.
Do it again, just replay the whole thing all over again.
It's exciting times. Before the 5 o'clock school board meeting, we had a naming of schools committee meeting, and that was in regards to a request that school board member Jill Spearing had in regards to our transportation building on Woody Crest. So, Mrs. Jill Spearing, will you please read the resolution?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Elrod. This resolution is to name the transportation building the Carlisle Beasley Jr. Building. Whereas Metro Nashville Public Schools Board of Education is the local governmental body responsible for providing public education to the students in Nashville, Tennessee, and whereas Carlisle Beasley Jr., a retired career employee of the Metro Nashville Public Schools Transportation Department, served 33 years as the Director of Pupil Transportation, passed away on Memorial Day, May 27, 2019, at the age of 83. And whereas his relentless focus on transportation safety for Nashville's public school students resulted in national prominence within the pupil transportation industry and an incomparable perfect safety record of more than 600 million daily school bus rides for Nashville students without a single fatality or serious injury. And whereas his successful execution of the transportation component of the 1971 court-ordered desegregation plan enabled Metro Nashville Public Schools to become nationally recognized as a model for successful student integration. And whereas throughout the transition stages of the desegregation plan, Mr. Beasley routinely broke down barriers by meeting arriving school buses in areas of stiff resistance, regularly escorting anxious children to the comfort of awaiting teachers and parents and principals, and intervening on their behalf in threatening situations. And whereas his successful safety record and selfless leadership style not only translated into national recognition for the Metro Nashville Public School District, but also translated into acknowledgement from his peers with national honors, including co-founder and president of the National Association of Pupil Transportation, National Safety Council board member and chairman of its School Transportation Committee. The Distinguished Service Awards, the highest honor given from both the National Safety Council and the National Association of Pupil Transportation, and School Bus Magazine's Man of the Year. And whereas the Metropolitan Nashville Board of Public Education, in gratitude for his exemplary service and on behalf of the students and parents served by the Metro Nashville Public School District, has unanimously decided to memorialize this extraordinary public servant by permanently naming the Metro Nashville Public Schools Transportation Department building as the Carlisle Beasley Jr. Building. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the building that houses the Metro Nashville Public School Transportation Department be permanently named Carlisle Beasley Jr. Building to recognize the substantial contribution of Carlisle Beasley Jr. made to the students and parents of the Metro Nashville Public School District and the citizens of Metro Nashville and Davidson County.
Thank you so much. Do you want to put the motion on the floor?
Yes. I move that we accept this resolution as read.
Second.
All right. Everyone in favor of passing this resolution, please raise your hand. It passes unanimously. Thank you again, guys, for doing this afternoon. I so appreciate Mrs. Spearing bringing this to us. Please be advised, if there's any family here, will you please let us know? Thank you for attending. We are so glad. Thank you. I will check in with you after our meeting and make sure that we have your contact information for a small ceremony and, of course, the plaque that goes up. Okay, thank you.
Item number 3, Knowledge Academies.
Okay. She's going to talk.
Let's get to it.
Evening again, board members. I have been asked to open the discussion of this topic with a summary of the status of the litigation filed by Knowledge Academies. Knowledge Academies allege that you should not have been able to have a private meeting to seek the advice of your attorney. The Chancellor has not made a final decision on that issue, but has ruled that you may not use or rely on information from the June 11th meeting as grounds for revoking Knowledge Academy's charter. However, the judge has acknowledged that the board may reinitiate the revocation process if desired. Therefore, if you wish to pursue revocation of the Knowledge Academy charters, you need to restart the information gathering and process of revocation. The information gathering can be done by you, by sharing information you have received or are aware of, or by giving direction to the charter school office that the information you want it to gather, about the information that you want it to gather in order to make a fair and informed decision. Sharing of this information or about concerns with Knowledge Academy should take place in public in tonight's board meeting or in a future board meeting. The process of revocation requires that 30 days written notice be given to the charter school with the reasons for possible revocation. Because of the way the court has ruled, this has not yet happened. If you wish to start that process, you should give that 30-day notice in public in tonight's board meeting or in a future board meeting. Also, the board could provide direction to the charter school office to follow up with the written notification. State law, Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-122, provides that a charter school agreement may be revoked by this board if the board determines that the school did any of the following. 1, committed a material violation of any of the conditions, standards, or procedures set forth in the charter agreement. 2, failed to meet or make sufficient progress towards the performance expectations set forth in the charter agreement. Or 3, failed to meet generally accepted standards of fiscal management. The board must state its reasons for a revocation in public and include those reasons for possible revocation in the 30-day written notice to the charter school. With that introduction, I will step back and allow the board to determine how it wishes to proceed. And obviously, I am here to answer any questions as you go through that process.
Ms. Bush?
Thank you, Corey. Thank you for your information. I want to first start off by saying that this board is never in favor of displacing any child. It's about the academic success and outcomes of our students. And unfortunately, KA has not presented that information, even tonight. I have heard tonight about keeping the school open. It needs to stay in the Antioch community, and yet I did not hear anything, and I don't think this board heard anything about the academic success of their students. This information or concerns was brought to my attention, serious concerns, back in March. That's when I was able to meet with parents, very concerned parents, about the direction of KA. Their concerns that surrounded KA was lack of certified teachers. Last year, KA had a very, just went downhill tremendously. About maybe midways into the semester, they started losing teachers, didn't have enough substitute teachers to fill those certified teachers. And then, of course, I think this year, coming up in this school year, there are not enough teachers to even run this school year. And I'll get that information a little later from Mr. Queen. We'll receive that information as where we are right now with as far as the teachers and the staff. After hearing what Mr. Renfro said tonight about teachers, I've heard from several teachers about the horrible conditions at KA when it came to the academic success of the students. As a matter of fact, this first graduating class, which we're very proud of those students, unfortunately are coming out into the world and they're not college and career ready. Over half those students have to take remedial courses. Those who got into college, they will have to take remedial courses because they are not prepared. And that is a very sad case for those students. I actually had an opportunity to speak to an athlete that actually got a full ride for his athleticism, but he too admitted to me that he was so afraid because he is not ready for college. Athletically, he is, but academically, he's not. And of course, I encouraged him to make sure that he was involved in getting the proper tutoring, et cetera, for his success while he's in school. Also with teachers, when KEI, I think KEI is the company now that is over Knowledge Academies, has not submitted a plan of action to the board. We have not received anything to let us know how they plan to move forward on correcting all of these problems with our students academically. Again, I heard tonight about keeping the school open. I heard tonight about keeping it in the Antioch community, but nothing did I hear about the academic success of our students. These are a list of things that were brought to my attention by the parents. Again, lack of certified teachers, not having enough substitute teachers to fill those spaces of certified teachers, teachers not being paid on time, lack of textbooks and online textbooks, missing scholarship money for the first graduating class of $500,000 that was promised to them. They did not get it. Poor communication. So we have NEI, who is now overseeing Knowledge Academies. And at this time, I want to open up the floor to my colleagues to see what other information that they want to present at this time.
I'd like to see if we can get an update from Mr. Queen on kind of where the ongoing investigations, for lack of a better word, are. I mean, what's been referred to the state, what's been referred to other authorities, where are we internally, what do we know that's confirmable, and then, there's obviously a lot of information that's already out in the public domain in the Tennessean, and we've all heard, or many of us have heard a lot of horror stories for years, but I'd like to just kind of hear the latest, if that's acceptable.
Thank you. We became aware of some issues probably late 2018. Art Fuller, the former CEO, was very accessible. We communicated frequently. We began to notice that when we would reach out to him or email him, we would not get responses. We did call him in this past spring and sat with him and gave him 2 notices of concern, which I will touch on in a moment, and also discussed the fact that we had problems reaching out and getting in touch with him to talk about some of the things we'd been hearing. There are some things that we do know currently. I will preface that by saying when we began to realize there were some serious problems there, we worked very closely with the governing board chair to try to support the best way we can, to help them ensure that the kids are being educated and the school would finish successfully for the children. And then there came a point when we had to take a hands-off approach, and we did not do any investigative work. We just recently, within the past week, were told we could begin doing that again. But what we do know, there's several things. Number one, poor academic performance, particularly for KA Knowledge High School and KA at the Crossing. These two schools were identified by the federal government as ATSI schools. These are additional targeted support and improvement schools. We would call them focus schools in Tennessee. We've found there was a lack of oversight by the governing board for some time. There was no board approval for recent contracts executed by the CEO, Mr. Art Fuller. There was, although we didn't find it in the actual audit, it is reported, and I've talked with Mr. Thomas, who has done some researching, that they were running a deficit balance of a little over $800,000 ending June 30, 2017. Numerous teacher complaints. Teachers have been contacting me. We haven't been doing much investigative work again until just recently. Numerous teacher complaints of being underpaid, short in payments, no promised stipends given. They were asked to accept late payments for a bonus. There were several businesses we determined were being ran out of the school building without governing board approval, knowledge. The CMO, which is NEI, was contracted to run the school without initial charter office notification. We were never notified that they were in consultation, or a request for a contract amendment, which would be required for a CMO. A school rental to a church was occurring, which was fine, but half of the rent was going to someone contracted with the school, but not an employee of the school. And the NEI and Knowledge Academies are trying to recoup that money currently. I did receive a second notice letter issued by the school requesting those funds be returned. I don't know what the status is currently. We can certainly follow up on that. We still do not have a school audit that was due December 2018. There was an extension granted by the Comptroller's Office. We believe that was due. The extension expired, we believe, July 1. So we don't have that audit yet. The Comptroller's Office was contacted on 2 occasions by my office, one via email, and the second one was electronically through another avenue to reach out. We have not heard from the Comptroller's Office as of now. There were notices of academic concern for the 2 schools I listed earlier, which were Knowledge High School and KA at the Crossing. The notices of academic concern were issued on February 12, 2019. There was a notice of concern for KA schools based on broad findings that was issued on April 26. This notice of concern was in reference to all of the things that began to come to light, which a lot of the TCNs reported on, and we've certainly been made aware of recently. Also, there was an exceptional education letter of concern issued to Knowledge Academy February 12, 2019. This had to do with special ed services, and there were some violations that warranted a notice of concern to them as well. Those are the things that we are confident we have that are occurring or have occurred. There are lots of other allegations that are being made currently. Again, I've received some phone calls and some emails, which we intend to follow up on, dependent upon the board's direction, of course. We did get it was mentioned earlier they were fully staffed or not fully staffed. It has been reported they are, but that has not been verified, that they are fully staffed. Just we were notified they were. So there's no verification on that at this point.
Has there been any law enforcement referrals?
No law enforcement referrals, just comptrollers at this point. So no, sir, no law enforcement.
Ms. Buggs?
I don't specifically have questions for you, Mr. Quinn, so thank you for this. You're welcome to stand or sit. It's up to you.
I'm sorry, do you have a question for, yes?
Okay, go ahead.
So the special ed violations, who gave them a notice of concern? Was that MNPS? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Our office gave them a notice of concern, which is it's kind of shot across the bow. It's a warning.
Do you know what it was in relation to?
Services.
Not providing
homebound,
services?
yeah, some services not provided. I can get you a copy of that. We typically notify the board when it's a letter of deficiency, which is real serious. Notices of concern, we typically do not notify the board on those because those are warnings.
You know what the enrollment today is supposed to be?
A little over 800. What is it? May I call Mary Lawrence up? She ran an analysis on something on attendance.
Hi. So in looking at the enrollment yesterday, I believe they were at 788 across all 3 schools. We do see lowered enrollment in their 5th grades and in 9th grade at the high school as compared to last year. So they're about 80 students below where they were last year at this time.
Hold on, Ms. Bugs, then.
If they have questions, they can ask.
Do you have questions for Mr. Queen? Okay, Mr. Pinkston.
Yeah, just one follow-up. Can you describe, the various side businesses that were being run out of the school, and then kind of how that relates to the charter agreement, or, how,
Well, reportedly, and I know Mr. Thomas, our coordinator, actually met with one of the contractors, but there were several contracts that were in play. One was a print shop where they were printing materials. It's my understanding that staff were even either encouraged or required to utilize that print shop for their materials. There was a food service. The teacher actually, I believe, the former teacher, I believe, has a suit or a grievance filed, I believe. She was hired, according to her, with the intent of teaching a course, and she wound up basically just preparing meals that were sold. And she was discouraged that she wasn't teaching a course. She was actually providing just a service through the school. Those are 2. John, there was a couple others.
The only other one was actually a contract that they had entered into a contract for if I had a hammer, but they were providing services for math and also connecting it to construction, and was working with local construction companies to try to get students certified. But that fell through.
Understanding there was an event facility leasing.
Yeah, they had an event with businesses, potentially contractors, but businesses at the school. It was an all-day event. I was aware they were having an event there. I didn't make it to it. I was planning to, and something came up. It's rumored they called school off. We don't know that at this point. Again, there's a lot of follow-up we will need to do around some of these allegations that we kind of sat on for a while.
And where's Art Fuller these days?
No one knows. Lots of rumors, but no, we don't know.
Another question for you from Ms. Walker, and then we'll go to Ms. Bugs.
Yes, ma'am.
So have you all been in communication with the families at Knowledge Academy? Are they aware of sort of the status of all of this? And I know they have a number
No,
of...
we're not allowed.
No.
Even if you did? No.
The chancellor, in her order, has enjoined MNPS from having any communication with the family, the parents, or students at Knowledge Academies. So MNPS has been unable to tell them anything.
Okay.
Bugs?
Mine is just to say thank you to the educators, to the board members that have been supporting Knowledge Academies. We understand that education is a thankless job, but also if you've listened to this kind of laundry list of allegations and frustrations, we have to be mindful of how students are being impacted and how this charter agreement has been broken. I've been reached out to by a couple of parents who were frustrated with what was happening at Knowledge Academies, and then I had a parent reach out to me and say that she had no clue that these things were happening. So I hope some of this has been illuminating, but the allegations just sort of speak for themselves. For those of you who had good or pleasant memories there, I can appreciate that, but I think we have been reached out a lot by parents and students and teachers to say that they didn't have that same experience.
Ms. Frog?
I have a statement, and I apologize because I am going to repeat some of the allegations, but I think it's very important to make a record, particularly since Knowledge Academies has sued the board. So here's my statement. Knowledge Academies is facing serious charges, including, number 1, operating multiple side businesses out of the school, including at least one for-profit business, leading to speculation that the school is just a shell pass-through for profiteering. Number 2, failing to pay teachers on time. Number 3, grade changing and inaccurate transcripts. Number 4, missing scholarship money. Number 5, failure to comply with federal requirements for special needs students. Number 6, understaffing leading to double the workload for teachers. Number 7, operating with a deficit of $835,878, despite touting an annual revenue of $7.1 million. Number 8, losing $270,000 through what it claims was a mysterious online phishing scheme, $190,000 of which was later recovered. Number 9, dismal academic results. The Tennessean states, quote, according to the most recent state testing data, 16% of Knowledge Academy's middle school students rank as proficient in English, and 15% are proficient in math. For the high school level, fewer than 5% of students were on track with or mastered algebra. For English, 12% of high school students were on, for the high school level, fewer than 5% of students were on track with or mastered algebra. For English, 12% of high school students were proficient in English 1, 19% were proficient in English 2, and 6% were proficient in English 3. Number 10, the disappearance of the school's CEO and founder after allegations of financial malfeasance surfaced. Apparently, no one can find him now. Number 11, lack of textbooks and access to online textbooks. Number 12, forcing economically disadvantaged students to buy expensive uniforms. Number 13, the need for remedial college classes, even for high-performing Knowledge Academies graduates. And number 14, firing certified teachers and using uncertified substitutes as teachers, and certified teachers are more expensive to maintain. I have never heard of anything that comes close to this level of mismanagement in any other MNPS school, either traditional or charter. When all of these disturbing allegations came to light, this board met with our attorney in executive session on June 11th for a briefing. After the meeting, board member Fran Bush, who has been dealing with complaints about the school for months, if not longer, brought public notice that she would make a motion at our next board meeting to discuss and vote on the revocation of Knowledge Academy's charter. What was Knowledge Academy's response? Did this school submit a corrective plan to the board? No. Instead, Knowledge Academies filed a fraudulent lawsuit against the board alleging that we violated sunshine laws by meeting with our attorney. As other members of the board can attest, I am the first to complain about violations of sunshine law in the back room, and there was no such violation here. But Knowledge Academies is willing to drag us all through depositions and a huge time waster of a lawsuit, knowing full well there was no violation of the sunshine law on June 11th. It is exceedingly stupid to attack your own authorizer with a fraudulent lawsuit and then celebrate it. But that is exactly what Knowledge Academies has chosen to do. Why? Knowledge Academies leaders knew that if they could eke out just a few more weeks of time, the district wouldn't have enough time to provide notice to parents and families to allow a closure this year. And if they can keep the school open one more year, they will have access to yet another year of per pupil funding, and that's what this is all about, profit, not students. In the meantime, Knowledge Academies has been taken over by a questionable charter management company from Florida called Noble Education Initiative, NEI. NEI claims to be nonprofit, but is tightly connected with a large for-profit charter management company called Charter Schools USA, which has been steeped in scandal. Not only is the executive director of NEI married to the CEO of the for-profit charter management company, Charter Schools USA, but she is also a former employee of Charter Schools USA. Furthermore, the two companies are headquartered close together on the very same street in Fort Lauderdale. In other words, there appears to be no wall between the allegedly nonprofit NEI and the clearly for-profit behemoth Charter Schools USA. For-profit management companies are prohibited from operating in Tennessee, but that doesn't stop charter entities from making money on our supposedly not-for-profit charter schools in Nashville. Here's what the chief investment officer of a charter capital company affiliated with Charter Schools USA had to say about, quote, investment in education. Quote, education infrastructure is a growing niche nationally, end quote. An article from the Sun Sentinel explains, quote, outside of the investor class, education infrastructure means schools. Florida has turned public education into a real estate play, with the public putting up the capital but getting none of the return. Here's how the scam works. The charter management company, a charter school operator, or an investor borrows money and puts up a building. The owner leases the building to a charter school, which uses public money to pay the rent. The owner uses the rent to make mortgage payments. The lease ends, the charter school leaves, and the public has financed a private building. Taxpayers lose money that would otherwise have been used for the public good, such as building and maintaining a new school for the community. This is all perfectly legal in Tennessee, and it's the very same model that Andre Agassi has followed in building new rocket ship charter schools here. We are all well aware of the lucrative Nashville real estate market. There are other legal ways to tap into charter school profit in Tennessee as well, such as paying less for teachers, selling school uniforms, supplies, or lunches, and in this case, printing, avoiding the purchase of expensive textbooks and other necessary classroom supplies, and of course, in this particular case, operating for-profit businesses out of a local charter school. Again, something I have never encountered during my service on the board. In addition, because of NEI's close ties with Charter Schools USA, it is worth noting the fact that Charter Schools USA has faced expensive scandals in Florida. In court cases, Charter Schools USA has been forced to pay $5 million to a family for failing to protect a student from repeated sexual assaults by an older student at one of their schools. And Charter Schools USA has also been ordered to pay a whopping $155 million to a principal at one of their schools who claimed the school ruined her health and career. Charter Schools USA also face an allegation of student rape in the dean's office at one of their high schools. In covering this story, CBS News reported that, quote, Charter Schools USA, a big for-profit outfit, is no stranger to allegations of looking the other way when it comes to the alleged sexual abuse of students. These are the folks that we have welcomed to Nashville through ties with NEI. I am sincerely sorry for the families and employees that are caught in the middle of this controversy. I've listened to those who've spoken tonight, and I have no reason to doubt their sincerity or their commitment. But this is not really about students, their well-being, or their academic success. It's about money, and in the end, it's the children of Nashville that will suffer.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe. Ms. Bush?
Thank you. Mr. Queen, please. Question. How many teachers have been, certified teachers have been hired for the middle and high school?
I don't have the exact numbers. What I do have is that they said they were fully staffed. I don't have a roster. I can't provide that. I can get it, but I can't provide that right now.
And how do they report their teacher hires through MNPS?
Through Human Resources.
Through Human Resources. And so right now we don't have a number.
I can check with HR to see what they have, but I can do that and then ask the school and compare the two.
Okay.
Are you done, Ms. Bush?
Let me ask you this way too. Also, we'll need, okay, yes, okay, because I was hoping we got an answer on that, because it's been told that, you know, they're completely staffed, and they're not, because I've seen Facebook posts that they're begging for teachers right now because they're not ready to open the school, even with the time that they bought out with this lawsuit, that they're going to open, and they're not fully staffed.
Let me apologize, because we had to stop what we were doing. So there's some investigative work we did not get to do. So there are some answers we don't have right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Pinkston?
Yeah, to Mr. Queen's point about questions that are still outstanding, man, I think there's, you know, quite a bit that we still don't know about Knowledge Academies and how this train wreck happened. But, you know, there are plenty of things that we know, including, you know, the idea of essentially outsourcing the management without consulting with the school board is a material violation of the original charter agreements. Not to mention, you know, the violation of the ban on for-profit charter operators in Tennessee, whether that's a material violation of the law or a violation in spirit. It's still, it's a violation to bring in somebody to essentially outsource the management without talking to the authorizer. So that's part of Ms. Harkey, I think 4913-122 material violation of the agreement. And then, of course, anybody who has sat through these conversations or the other conversations that we've had individually with members of the community, any reasonable person would see that the school, this operator has failed to meet generally accepted standards of financial and fiscal management. That's just, that's not in doubt at this point. So, and that's the other component under that charter closure statute. So based on those two things, I feel like we're in good standing to proceed with a revocation if that's the will of the board.
I think, Ms. Bush, do you have a motion you want to make?
Yes. I move to require the charter school office to send written notice to Knowledge Academies that the board may consider a motion to revoke the charter agreements after 30 days based on reasons for possible revocation as stated and discussed during this board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Need a show of hands? It's unanimous. I want to say something. So I will definitely agree, and I always appreciate. Sometimes it's draining, sometimes it's emotionally painful, but public participation exists for a reason. And so I commend all of you who took the time to come out and speak on behalf of your children and on behalf of your desire to have your kids at Knowledge Academy. There were a couple of comments made, and there's just one I want to just to highlight, and I've said this before because we've been here before with other charters, and we always get, well, these things are happening in traditional schools as well, and we're accountable for that. And we have lots of entities that take great pleasure in holding us accountable for that. But we have to hold our charters accountable. And I'm going to use a very trite, and I apologize for the simplicity of it, analogy. I hate sweeping in my house. I do. I like making piles of trash, but I don't like picking them up. There's lots of evidence of this. People will tell you. People in my family know. Don't ask me why. If my housekeeper that I pay, who has come to me and said that she's good at her job and she's an excellent cleaner and she does this so much better than others, and because it's private and I'm not going through a mainstream company, it's a one-on-one thing, and she can come and meet me where I am and come when it's convenient to me. If she comes in my house and sweeps up a pile of trash and doesn't pick it up, I have to fire her because I'm paying for something that she did not deliver on. And that is the either blessing or curse of the charter relationship. It's the risk we all take when we decide that we want to put our kids in charters, because we're not just trusting charters to educate our kids. Because when we put our students in mainstream, the number one thing that we have to be concerned about, and as a parent, the number one thing I'm concerned about is my child learning? But when you choose a charter, you have to be concerned about the board. You have to be concerned about the CEO. You have to be concerned about whether their finances are in order. You have to be concerned about are they doing business properly. You have to be concerned about are their teachers certified. As parents, you have to have that level of focus and concern and insight and questioning, because you don't have 4 layers of other people that are double checking that. And it's what we have to do. And as Mrs. Bush said, we do not look forward to displacing children, because the issues we're discussing, a child should have no knowledge of, should not even be aware of, shouldn't have to be concerned about. And the unfortunate thing that tends to happen, and it happens in our mainstream schools, that we're so distracted about what's different from the traditional schools. We're not focused on the things that aren't working as well as they work in the traditional schools. And so here we are, and it is our responsibility, not our pleasure, not our joy. We have not been waiting and watching the clock since 3:30 for this moment to come. It is the unfortunate responsibility of this board to ensure that those operators, and I've used this analogy as well, those vendors, just like we check vendors, every other contract, Knowledge Academy is a vendor for us that has agreed to provide a service in accordance with a contract that actually talks about fiscal solvency, proper business operations and practices, as well as academic achievement. And so when any of those areas are missed, when they're not firing on all cylinders, it's our responsibility to respond. And that's where we are. I'm done with this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I have a second motion, I'm sorry.
A second? Okay.
Okay, right now.
Go for it.
All right, thank you. I do have a second motion. I move to require the charter school office to also request any additional documentation from Knowledge Academies needed for consideration by the board in the possibility of revocation decisions. Thank you.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any other questions about the second motion? All in favor with a show of hands, please? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Queen. And I just want to take a moment to say, Mr. Queen, I appreciate you and your staff for what you do. It is nonstop work that you guys are engaged in, and your reports that come to us are always thorough. They're always efficient. They're always succinct. And it again, guys, I want to say, we will be responding to the recommendation from the charter office. This is not a decision that we're sitting around discussing, trying to decide. We have charged, what has just happened is we've charged Mr. Queen and his office to continue their investigation of practices at Knowledge Academy, and they will come back to us with a recommendation regarding the charter. Thank you. And I'm just going to ask Ms. Frog that when you get ready to open up your PI firm, you provide us some stuff. And married to who? You good? You ready?
Yes.
All right, we're on to director's report, I think. I don't have an agenda, it's gone. There it is, director's report.
All right, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, board members. This evening, we will provide you an update on our strategic plan, focusing on our key performance indicators and take a deeper look at moving the needle in literacy. Our MNPS theory of action reads that if we focus on building principals, teachers, coaches, and central office staff's capacity to improve school culture and ensure high-quality literacy instruction, then we will have outstanding academic achievement for all children. In a moment, we will hear from Chief Academic Officer Dr. David Williams and his literacy team, who will set out the strategic approach for the school year. But first, I would like to invite Dr. Paul Changus, Executive Director of Research and Evaluation, up to the podium. He will take a look and walk us through where we landed last school year in relation to our priorities and walk us through this year's priority KPIs. Dr. Changus.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. So as I think everyone is well aware, we had 3 areas of focus this past year, the first being growth and literacy, as measured by both our measures of academic progress, our MAP assessments, and our 10-Ready data. And we do not, of course, have the 10-Ready data back for 2019 yet. So the data in front of you for literacy is our MAP results, which you have seen earlier in the year. We set a pretty ambitious target that 60% of our students, and this would be in grades 2 through 9, will meet or exceed the projections that are made based on national norms. And I say those are ambitious because the national average is 50%. We fell at a little short of that at 57.7% this past year. And as you may remember, when we adjusted for the fact that we had a change in accommodations, that number was 55.4% when we exclude those students. We did have a number of schools, however, who did exceed that 60% target, and this is one of the key measures that we have in our school performance indicators. With regard to average daily attendance, in 2018 we were at 94%. And our goal was to get to 95%, and 1 percentage point may not sound a lot, but we did indicate earlier in the year it was going to be a challenge. However, Unfortunately, we are flat in that measure. We continue to be at 94% at the end of 2019 school year. I will say that we did see improvement in terms of the percent of students who are chronically absent. That number fell by 2 percentage points. But if you look at the percentage of students in school on a typical day, that number was flat. And our third KPI is our out-of-school suspension rate for African American students. In 2017-18 school year, that was a 13.7% number. We were hoping to get that down by a full percentage point to 12.7. However, that number moved in the wrong direction. It increased to 14.5%. What we saw over the course of the year is earlier in the year we were ahead of the pace compared to 2017-18, but the suspensions did increase as the school year progressed. So that again is trending in the wrong direction. What our data tells us is where we are and the trends that we're seeing. And as part of our continuous improvement model, we have to look at that data, take a hard look, and look at the lessons learned from it. And our goal, as Dr. Battle has indicated many times, is continuous improvement. We're looking at for incremental gains on a day-by-day basis and building on those. As I did mention earlier, though, that we had schools that did indeed hit those targets, and part of our review process is what kinds of lessons can we learn from those cases and spreading best practices. We met in recent weeks with district staff to identify our targets for the coming year and the measures. And we are going to hold steady with the ambitious goal of getting 60% of our students to hit their targets in literacy for the coming year, again, based on MAP and 10-ready data. We start over with this number every year when we're talking about growth. Even though we were at 57% last year, we're going to be looking at growth on the MAP in August as our baseline, so we're trying to build on the gains that we saw previously. Our second goal, again, we've held steady with average daily attendance, trying to get that increase from 94 to 95%. There was quite a bit of discussion about should we focus on chronic absence. However, chronic absence limits our population to a relatively small percentage of students who are struggling. We wanted to focus on a more positive measure, the percentage of students who are there every day. Plus, this measure counts every student and every day so that we are constantly shooting for improvement over the course of the year. We want to reduce the behavior incidents, and we didn't reset our target. Even though we moved back 0.8 of a point, we're still shooting to get to that 12.7% in the coming year. And we'll talk in future times about lessons learned, but we know that schools need support in order to get there. And finally, we've added a new goal. We've heard from our principals. We're held accountable for math. Schools are being identified for priority status based on math scores as well as literacy scores. So similar to our literacy goal, we are shooting to hit 60% of our students, meeting or exceeding the targets that are based on national averages on the MAP or on state targets and progression for the 10-ready tests, TBOS measures. So, we've added one goal, but this is something we've been held accountable for as a district and for our schools. So, as part of the continuous improvement process, it's important that we look at our data, review our progress, identify areas that are working well and areas that aren't, where we need to change conditions. So we've met, leadership has met in the past month or so to really focus on a number of areas that are bulleted. I'm not going to go through each of these, but you'll see the column headings align with our 4 KPIs for the coming year. But Dr. David Williams is going to be addressing what we're headed for with regard to literacy and the specific initiatives. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Chengus. Good evening, Dr. Battle, Dr. Gentry, board members. My name is David Williams. I'm the interim chief academic officer. I'm pleased to provide some information to you tonight with regards to our literacy work for the 1920 school year. At your request, at the board's request, I'm also excited to introduce our district literacy leaders to you. I thought it was important that you get to meet them, see them, and also hear from them as they speak to you about their work. So I'm going to quickly introduce them and go through the presentation. So first we have Phyllis Phillips. She's the director of early learning, formerly the pre-K department. It's evolved now into the early learning department. So Phyllis Phillips. I'm going to ask Aaliyah Washington-Smith to stand quickly. She's the interim director for elementary literacy. Courtney Wilkes is the interim director of secondary literacy. And then Jill Petty, last but not least, is the interim executive officer for the curriculum instruction department. So you'll hear briefly from each of these ladies about how the literacy work will play out and look across the school year. It's important to note, and I think you'll hear this from the presentation, that one of our internal goals is to align our work. And so I think you'll see some coherence and some cohesion with that reflected in the presentation tonight. I'll ask that you keep questions till the end, and we'll be glad to take those. I think I provided the PowerPoint for you all. You have that in the folder, okay, to follow along. Let's see. Oh, I've got to do the PowerPoint. I just got ahead of myself, didn't I? Okay. There we go. Thank you. All right, here we go. All right, so I want to be clear that our emphasis tonight is on Tier 1 instruction. And as Dr. Chengus just mentioned, we have an ambitious literacy goal for the school year. And while that goal gives our work purpose, we know that the true meaning in our work is that reading can deeply enrich the lives of our students. And that's our charge. So we're going to begin with foundational skills. That's going to be one of our key instructional priorities this year. Primarily seated in the early grades is to explicitly teach our students to read by equipping them with decoding skills. The second is text-based planning, and we know that excellent instruction does not happen on accident. It's got to be designed, and the strength of text-based planning is that you gather a group of teachers, you leverage their strengths, they engage in the text themselves as they plan for the questions and tasks that they will implement with their students. And finally, we want to elevate student voice through speaking and writing. This is also an important goal of the Social and Emotional Learning Department. We believe that each student has creative talents. They have unique ideas and experiences that actually really matter. And by elevating their voice, they're provided the opportunities to share these experiences, bring them to the table, strengthen and enrich the academic experience of themselves and their classmates, as well as promote their own social and emotional learning growth. I want to share a little bit of data with you, so follow along with me here. So what this graph shows is the probability of students who are in various risk levels as defined by our FAST assessment. Our FAST assessment is given to all kindergarten and first grade students across the district 3 times a year. And what this assessment does is classify them, are they at a high risk for falling behind grade level, or are they at a low risk for falling below grade level, or somewhere in between, and that would be the reduced risk, some risk, or moderate risk. What this graph shows is the probability that if I'm in one of those categories, what's the probability that I would end up on track or mastered in 3rd grade as measured by our TN Ready state assessment. And specifically what this graph says is that if I'm in the high risk category, again, I'm at a high risk, I'm flagged for high risk of being severely behind grade level, I am 13 times less likely to be on track by 3rd grade, as assessed by TN Ready, when compared to the students who are categorized and scored at low risk. So then the question is, where are our students falling along this risk distribution? And that's what this slide shows. And again, this is the FAST early reading scores, and this is for our kindergarten and first grade students. I left out TN Ready because, again, Dr. Chengus said we'll have that soon, we hope. And MAP, we've covered that extensively. So I wanted to give this update on our FAST because it's not something we've talked about a lot, but it also gives us a strong foundation to talk about what are we doing in the early grades to teach our kids the reading skills that they need. But you can see here in kindergarten, this was our most recent administration data from the May of 2019, that we have 23% of our students are in the high-risk category. And not to mention 17.6% of our students are at some risk. So nearly 40% of our students pose some risk to falling behind grade level. In grade 1, it's actually slightly worse, right? We have 30.5% of our students in first grade identified as being in the high-risk category. And again, high risk for falling significantly behind grade level. When we compare that to the national average, we can see that 10% of the students nationally, this is a nationally normed assessment, 10% of the students are actually identified as high risk. So while we have our priority KPI and that gives us an aim or a target, and we will work to reach it, we know that it's important that as we're thinking about our work this year, we're thinking long-term. So we know that a strong investment at the early grades and explicitly teaching our students how to read pays dividends down the road. So here are, based on our 3 priorities, they're born out of these 6 characteristics of classrooms that develop proficient readers. The first one is a positive culture of learning where students follow the behavioral expectations and are meaningfully engaged in the work of a lesson. The second one is a daily literacy block, which provides the students the opportunity to listen, read, speak, think, and write about text in meaningful and purposeful ways. Explicit instruction and the appropriate foundational skills so that students can apply and master those skills through authentic reading and writing opportunities. And that needs to be coupled with comprehension instruction using high-quality complex text or text sets. Rich questions and tasks, again, from the text-based planning that are aligned to state standards and build the students' comprehension of the text. And then finally, we want the transfer of the cognitive work and who's doing the thing in the classroom to be on the kids and not so much the teacher.
So with that, the priorities in pre-K will focus on foundational skills, specifically the areas of phonemic awareness and writing. And as a reminder, phonemic awareness is the ability to detect and manipulate the sound structure of words independent of their meaning. It is highly predictive of and related to children's later ability to read. On the screen, you see some of the strategies that will be used to assist teachers in addressing foundational skills in writing within the classroom. We will offer professional development in the area of literacy instruction throughout the year, whether it's in PD sessions, professional learning communities, webinars, or coaching sessions. We will also assist in creating daily schedules that minimize the amount of time in whole group instruction and increase the amount of time for small group instruction so that teachers can target the specific areas each individual student may need. Teaching students to write for meaning is still a challenge for us, and we understand that additional professional development offerings are needed to ensure understanding of best practices. But we also know that teachers need the resources to teach quality writing instruction. So we will provide additional tools and materials such as pinchers and clay to strengthen a child's small motor skills in order for students to even begin writing. We will also add materials like clipboards, journals, and writing instruments that will motivate students and give students more opportunities to write.
Hello, I'm Aaliyah Washington Smith, the Interim Director of Elementary Literacy. And I just want to share with you some of the goals for elementary literacy for the 2019-2020 school year. We first want to refer back to these 6 characteristics of classrooms that develop proficient readers. While all 6 of these characteristics are critically important, and we're not neglecting any of them, we want to ground our work in these 3 specific areas. Number 1, improving the explicit instruction that we provide to students in foundational skills. Secondly, comprehension instruction that helps support students in understanding not just complex texts, but a variety of texts and text sets. And also making sure that we're providing students with opportunities to engage in high-level questions and rigorous tasks. So what is the importance of foundational skills? Foundational skills are important because when students are taught through an approach that emphasizes phonological awareness and phonics instruction, then students on average see 7 to 8 standard points higher on reading comprehension than other approaches. Also, because early, explicit, systematic instruction in foundational skills actually can prevent future reading difficulties. And when students are already struggling, it can remediate those difficulties. So what are our elementary literacy priorities for this coming school year? Number one, to improve foundational skills instruction. It's critically important that we use vetted instructional materials, that students also engage in practice that offers them opportunities to practice in authentic reading and writing contexts. So they're not just learning foundational skills in isolation, they're actually applying those skills in real reading and writing contexts. We're going to utilize the existing expertise of our LTDSs, our school-based LTDSs, number one, in supporting teacher capacity, building teacher capacity at the building level, but also providing professional development at the district level. Our second priority is text-based planning. So we want to ensure that we are leveraging the teachers that are in our building. We need to support them in continuing to develop their ability to plan high-quality text-based lessons so that students are supported and they're provided the differentiation they need to be successful. So text-based planning, using some protocols that we've already put in place, we want to strengthen that collaborative planning that's already in place.
Good evening. I'm Courtney Wilkes, the Interim Director for Secondary Literacy. So as you can see, we're coming back to these proficient readers and how we're developing them once again. In secondary, we'll be focusing on these 2 points: a positive culture of learning in the classroom for students to feel safe and engaging in the work, and putting the load, the cognitive lift, on the students. So students are responsible for doing the heavy thinking, speaking, and writing in a class. This work builds on our work from the previous 2 years. In the previous 2 years in secondary literacy, we really focused a lot on developing and choosing high-quality texts and text sets, designing and implementing high-quality questions and tasks that are standards aligned. And so this year, we're really focusing now on the implementation of that and how do we put students at the center of that work. So our goal will be primarily to elevate student voice in the classroom, both through speaking and writing. To do that, we have to provide students with plenty of opportunities to share, explain, and defend their thinking, both in speaking and in writing. We need to help some teachers have some more ideas about how do we provide those protocols and structures within a class to elevate that student voice. We do know that some strategies work better than others. Classroom discussion, getting feedback, metacognitive thinking, having students think about what they're thinking and learning. These and getting effective writing, extended writing opportunities as well. So we will help teachers develop these protocols and strategies to use on a daily basis in their classroom. We will also utilize text-based planning. I'm sure you're seeing a cohesive thread here between pre-K through 12. Text-based planning, putting teachers and acknowledging the collective efficacy of teacher learning. We know that is a huge effect size on the implications for student learning. So leveraging that expertise of the LTDSs and teacher leaders through text-based planning protocols and putting teachers also at the center of our work.
Good evening. Jill Petty. It's great to be in front of you again. I'd like to take a moment to summarize what the Director of Early Learning and the Directors of Elementary and Secondary Literacy shared with you, as these are our 3 priorities we're going to be focusing on this year, K through 12. So the emphasis is on Tier 1 instruction. We need high-quality Tier 1 instruction at all grade levels. So in our early grades, we're really honing in on the foundational skills work that we're going to be doing. In all grade levels, focusing on text-based planning, helping teachers understand how to get the most out of the text they're using to ensure that students have the opportunity to really grapple and learn from the text they're reading. And we really want to ensure that we're elevating student voice through those speaking and writing opportunities in the classroom on a regular basis. So who's going to be responsible for this work? All of us. We have to start with our learner, our primary learner, and that is our students. We must do all that we can to ensure that they have high-quality instruction in every grade level. In order to do that, we have to build capacity in our district. And we need to start with building the capacity of the instructional leaders at the central office. We also need to ensure that we're building the capacity of our school-based leadership and, of course, our teachers, because we must make sure our students have that opportunity for high-quality instruction. We will use the support or the structures that we currently have in place to get this done. However, what's really important is that our students have the highest quality instructional materials available to them, which leads us to start looking ahead. We are embarking on the new ELA adoption cycle. We are underway as of now. So we will be following the state and our MNPS board policy in seeing that we do the adoption cycle as we are meant to do. We have started by selecting our teacher committees. We have committees selected by grade bands. 100% of their committees are made up of teachers. All of them are classroom teachers. So we have put some protocols in place to ensure our approach is solid, clear, and cohesive. We reviewed our committee selection processes, and we got them in place. We started in the spring and vetted the people who applied for those committees. We have a training plan and support plan in place so that those committee members fully understand how to use and execute the tools to vet the materials by. We've been working closely with the communications department to ensure that we are communicating with all stakeholders on a regular basis throughout this adoption cycle. This year, we've also put in place an advisory council. That advisory council is giving us feedback and vetting our plan throughout the entire process. We have included stakeholders from a variety of groups. We have EL representation, exceptional ed representation, content area teacher representation, community members, principals, because we want to ensure that all eyes get to have a look at what we're doing to ensure that we're providing the best materials for our students. Thank you.
So just a couple final points, and then I'll ask the team to come up, and we'll be happy to take your questions. We just got through a contentious, somewhat volatile budget season, and is that fair to say, Chris? Okay, great. Yep. Okay. And as Jill said, next spring we will bring the recommendations from our teacher committees to the board for approval for new ELA adoption, new ELA materials to go into the classroom in the fall of 2020. We haven't even gotten the state list yet, so it's not really possible to start our review, but we're excited to get that list soon to commence our reviews. Early estimations, though, if we were to fully fund materials for all of our students and all our teachers is between $7 and $8 million. 2 years ago, when we funded our science materials, it was $2.167 million. And then this past year, around $3.8 million for social studies, world languages, and then to go back and try to make whole what we could with some science and arts from the previous year. So just to give you an idea of where we're headed, about a year from now, we'll be looking to execute a purchase for new literacy materials for K-12. And the second thing is, I just want to ask the board, to really support and advocate for us and encourage your communities and the parents to reach out to you to really be involved in the schools, with the kids, ask them what they're reading about, sit down and read with them, make sure they're doing the homework, but really just encourage the board and all of us, as Jill said, who's responsible, we all are, and this is a moral imperative that we get this right. It's critically important. And so with that, I'll invite the team up to take your questions.
Ms. Spearing?
Thank you, David, and thank you, team. I heard the word foundational skills used 4 times. And David, if I understood you correctly, you said that means decoding skills. So it sounds like the first priority is to learn to decode, which bothers me. I don't think we send kids to school to learn how to decode. I think we send kids to school to learn how to read, and decoding and phonics is important in that process, but it is not the process. The process is in books, reading real text. And phonics and all of that is used in service to meaning, not the other way around. So that's a major concern for me right off the bat. One of the things that Paul talked about was average daily attendance. There are schools, Goodlettsville Elementary School is an example of this, where they are using the Ron Clark strategies. The whole school studied with Ron Clark, and those kids cannot wait to get to school, and their attendance rate is like 97, 98%. And even there was a policeman who picked up a child walking to school because he had missed the bus, and he said, I can't miss, and a policeman picked him up and brought him to school. That kind of enthusiasm is what we want. And to look at schools like Goodlettsville Elementary that's doing that, I think is important to spend some time there. I think improving professional development is vital, and we've got to have great professional development, not decoding, but how do you work with these kids? I mean, you just said this on number 3, on page 3, 13% kids in the high-risk category are in first grade are 13% less likely to score on track. So what are we doing for those kids? What are we doing for kids in first grade that are at this high-risk category?
Thank you for your questions. So I want to circle back to an initial concern you had about proficient reading. So our vision for proficient reading is that reading is about making meaning. That's the goal. That's why students engage in the reading process. So I thank you for that clarification about our role. And that is what our work is grounded in. Even as we teach foundational skills, we are still always sending kids back to the text to think about the meaning of the text. So it's very important that we keep in mind the meaning of the text as we're teaching foundational skills. So we're doing both. Right now, we're focusing on supporting kids with early literacy skills, but that's not all we're doing. We're still helping kids make meaning with text all throughout the literacy block. So thank you for that. Also, when we're thinking about how to support students that are not successful right now with the reading process, one of the things that we're trying to do is to strengthen Tier 1 instruction so that students are successful during that Tier 1 instruction so they don't need Tier 2 or Tier 3 instruction. So one of the ways to strengthen that is to address not just foundational skills, but also knowledge building, reading comprehension, to support students with vocabulary instruction. All of those different areas help students to become successful readers. They work together. So we're doing all of those things, but we're also needing to provide intensive professional development around how do we teach students how to read. And that's a continuing process. We're leveraging the knowledge of our LTDSs. We're strengthening the coaching support that we're providing. And we're going to make sure that teachers are equipped with the tools that they need to teach reading in an integrated, comprehensive way that doesn't just focus on one area of reading, but focuses on helping kids make full meaning of text, of various types of texts.
There's no place in here is the word strategies used. We have to teach children strategic processing. I was so glad to hear Courtney say thinking. Reading is about thinking, making meaning, thinking. Did what I just say make sense? Am I predicting right? I predicted that this would happen. Did that happen? And going back and thinking about the story and then predicting what's going to happen and then checking to be sure that that's what happened. So I was glad to see Courtney talk about thinking skills. In 2016-17, I have a report that says that only 37% of students were reading proficiently or at advanced levels in 16-17. Paul, could you tell me how many of our students last year were reading proficiently or above?
You're talking about with 10 ready?
This is information that came from a handout at the board. It didn't say 10 ready. It said that 37% of our kids were reading proficiently. So do you think that's 10 ready?
I'm sorry, what was the number you used?
37%.
Yeah, that's in the ballpark of where we were. I would have to look at the specific number in terms of being on track or mastered. When you use the term proficiency, you know, what we're talking about now with 10 ready is not the same standard we had before of a basic minimum proficiency and on grade level status. It's whether students are on track to be college and career ready. But yeah, I think I'd have to check the exact number, but that's about right.
Would you get back with me on that, please? Thank you. There was talk about writing throughout your presentation. And one of the things, Phyllis, maybe let's start with you. You talked about using different resources for teaching writing at kindergarten. You mentioned clay and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to understand.
So I was talking about that for pre-K classrooms, and I was talking about children come in, and a lot of them aren't capable of holding a pencil correctly or knowing the tension to place on the paper to even form a letter. So we build strength in their muscles by using clay or those pinchers that they can grab small things with that will build those muscles up so that they can even get to learning to hold a pencil correctly. Unlike me, I cannot, but yes.
Okay, I taught kindergarten for many years, and my kids would come in, and I taught at Kirkpatrick as well, so kids of all socioeconomic backgrounds. The first day, the kids came to school, and every day they drew a picture, and then they wrote a story. So they didn't need a lot of, they might draw a picture with a pencil, with crayons, with that kind of medium, but they knew that every day they were going to draw something about their life, their family, their home, what was interesting to them at school. Every day they were responsible for that. And then they wrote a story. And it might be only using initial initial sounds that they could hear. It may not be the first letter, but initial sounds that they heard. So there's a way to do that. If we're focusing on that from day one and writing, how do we engage students so that in kindergarten, every day, they're writing. In pre-K, they're drawing pictures.
Exactly.
Every child can draw a picture. And then they can tell you what they've drawn about, and they can share it in author circle, and they can have that discussion, and then they can learn from one another. That's what I want to see, and that's what I want to hear, not only at the kindergarten level, but at the first grade level. And we've got to, this data is just amazing to me. 9 out of 10 high school dropouts struggle to read because they didn't learn to read in third grade. They are they're struggling to read at third grade level. Youth who fail to complete high school by age 20 are 7 times more likely to be persistently poor readers. 2/3 of all youth in the juvenile court system could not read in 4th grade. $3.1 billion are spent annually to improve the literacy skill and entry level for workers. We've got to get this in. Elementary is the most important to me. Of course, I'm clear that I have a prejudice. But if they get to middle school and they're not reading proficiently, they're not going to be successful. And that doesn't start with learning to decode. That starts with, I can't wait to get this book. I can't wait to read this story. That's the enthusiasm. And all those sub-skills, all those foundational skills are learned as they're reading these books. And we have, a gradient of difficulty of books that are in every school, in every elementary school, that I'm sure our LTDSs have access to. And I would like to know if we have, how that looks across the district. Do we have enough books at varying levels for our students? Do we need more books? What is the, give us some information about what needs are important for this board to address.
Yes, ma'am. I can speak to the anchor text list that we provided for the scope and sequence, and those are publicly available online. In the past 2 years ago, we made a decision to purchase one actual anchor text for every 3 teachers based on that ratio because of the limited funding. We have allotted extra funding over the last year so that we could actually provide every single teacher with the anchor text. Those anchor texts are aligned in our scope and sequence. They comprise text sets so that they're culturally diverse, they're complex, as identified by our complexity rubric scales. And last year, again, we purchased one book for every 3 teachers. Some of those anchor texts have had to change because we have tried to really align the content and knowledge building of the ELA curriculum with the science and social studies standards. And the social studies standards changed this year. So we had to go back and realign some of the work and the text that aligned to the social studies books, so that necessitated some changes to our anchor text sets. But again, we were committed to making sure that every teacher had a 1-to-1 ratio, not a 1-to-3 ratio, so that those were in there. And the books that still remain in the class, that may not necessarily be part of the anchor text set, are still, they provide that gradient, as you say, to a range of levels and skill abilities for students. And I'll ask Aaliyah if you have anything else to speak to about that.
I do want to quickly address level text. So each of our elementary schools in MNPS have book rooms that are fully equipped with level text so that students that are reading at different levels and need support in small group instruction can receive that support. Elementary teachers can go into the book rooms, give an informal running record, go into the book room, choose a text at an appropriate level of difficulty to support that student in learning to read. And also they have texts that are available to them in building knowledge, some of which are aligned to the units that they're currently teaching in the scope and sequence. So we actually provide students with a range of texts to support the learning to read and the reading to learn process, but it's all centered around comprehension and helping them to integrate the very complex process that is learning to read.
Thank you. And my last question is about summer school. What have we done this summer to help students at the elementary level who have not been proficient, who have not become proficient readers prior to this time?
Lee's going to talk about Read to Be Ready Camps, and I know that the funding ran out for that. This is our last year in that, but been a fortunate member of the Alignment Nashville team, which is part of the Blueprint for Early Childhood Success, to really partner strategically with camps around town. Last fall, if you remember, I gave a report about that, and it was the 660 minutes was a tipping point that resulted in a 0.9 national normal curve equivalent gain, which is about an extra additional month of instruction throughout the summer months, and that was evidence from our February to our August MAP data. And so we think that was a good indication of that work is promising in the summer to prevent and mitigate summer slide. Specifically, this year, what we've done was we kind of took a heat map approach, and we said, where are schools that have the greatest summer slides? We targeted those schools with their their branch libraries that were in close proximity and really partner with the camps and community programs that are in those areas to target those specific kids that had the greatest summer slide last year. And so we're in the middle of that. We're halfway through our second year of our summer reading partners program, and I'll be happy to give you guys an update as soon as we get our data back and Paul's team has the opportunity to analyze it. But I'll also let Elise talk specifically about the Read to Be Ready camps that have gone on the last several years, and again, this in its final year.
So Read to Be Ready is actually a summer program that's designed by the State Department of Education. They funded it now for, I believe, 3 years, and a number of our MNPS elementary schools participate. In fact, a little over 700 elementary students actually received Read to Be Ready summer support over the course of this summer in 2019. So a lot of our students are able to participate. Of course, we'd love for there to be more students, but just so you know a little bit about the instruction that happens for those students during the Read to Be Ready camps, those students are engaged in a more unit-based design that's interdisciplinary. So they're learning about science, they're learning about highly engaging social studies subjects, but they are also receiving books. So they get free books that they can take home and add to their little libraries at home. So if they don't have text at home, during this Read to Be Ready camp, they aren't just receiving instruction, they're receiving books. So it's promoting a love for reading. We are growing readers, students that are highly motivated and engaged and that love to read. And we want to do that during the school year. That's what we're promoting because that's our goal, but we want to do that during the summer months too, and that's what occurs during the Read to Be Ready camps. It's a really powerful literacy experience for students.
Can we let Ms. Walker?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's spread the wealth here. Okay. Ms. Walker.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for preparing this for us. So tell me a little bit about how high risk is defined on the FAST test, and how many years have we been administering FAST now?
This is our third year, so we do have some longitudinal data that we can share with you. Katie Patullo is our FAST expert. I'll call her up. She oversees the administration of our FAST assessment across the district. So I can let her speak to what distinctly characterizes high risk.
The way that we have it broken out on the report that you saw is in alignment with our state requirements regarding interventions, cuts for intervention. So actually on that report, high risk is below the 10th national percentile. And some risk would be between the 10th and 24th national percentile. And then we also wanted to break out the moderate risk area, so that's 25th to 39th. I'm getting old, okay. We wanted to break that out as well because we do know that really the 40th percentile is really the on track where we want to see students. So we wanted to break that out as well. However, students who are scoring below the 25th national percentile are the students that we're particularly wanting to ensure that we're providing additional interventions for.
So this chart is for this year's, that just finished?
Yes,
right?
yes.
So this is a cohort and this is a cohort?
Correct.
Right?
All kindergarten.
Is that the trend you see all 3 years, where you see a drop in that way? I know these are not the same kids.
Right,
but
correct.
Next year, would you see these kindergartners have lost ground?
We have seen that, yes. Yeah, and again, I'll go back and, but yes, we have seen that.
Okay. So what are you doing with that kind of information? I mean, I'm curious.
Right.
How you're addressing that.
Right. So I think, first and foremost, we really want to be using this data to strengthen our Tier 1 core instruction, because this screening instrument is designed to be highly sensitive, and we're using it with our very youngest learners because it's nationally normed and it can tell us, it can kind of give us that early warning flag, right, that we need to do something right away to get students back on a trajectory of growth, to keep them on track and at grade level. And so one of the things that we would do with this information, and by the way, these scores are composite scores. So the early reading measures are made up of 4 subtests that change throughout the course of the year, right? And so one of the things we do is to dig into those subtests and really look at particular areas where we're noticing that we need to provide extra support in core instruction. And, where are the areas where we're seeing fewer than 80% of students responding to what we're providing in our Tier 1 instruction, and strengthening that and focusing on that in professional development and some of the things that you heard. And then also providing interventions for students, particularly those students falling into that high-risk category that are very targeted to meet individual needs.
So you talk on slide 9 about using strong vetted instructional materials. What is that vetting process, and do you feel like you have high-quality instructional materials now?
Yes, for Tier 1. So currently, Journeys was our adopted set of materials back in 2014. And if you look at Ed Reports, you can get there in probably 3 clicks and look at how Journeys scored. We know that generally the curriculum scored poorly. I think it's like a 12 out of 36 according to their point scale. However, their foundational skills section scored pretty high, 18 out of 22. So we're confident in continuing to use the Journeys materials. And again, it circles back to we're having an ELA adoption. So this time a year from now, we'll be having new materials across the board. But we feel strongly about continuing to use the Journeys component for the foundational skills, and the pre-K they use Heggerty's. And those both have been strongly vetted in quality materials.
And so, just 1 or 2 more things. So your LTDSs, so do you feel like, how many years have you had those in place now?
2 years. 2 years ago, we sort of wiped the slate, if you will, and rehired, re-interviewed all the literacy building-based coaches, and those are the literacy teacher development specialists, or LTDS. So we just finished our 2nd full year where it was required in the student-based budgeting formula that every school staff an LTDS.
And so they are hired, selected by the principal?
They are hired through a pool process. So they come through a screening and vetting process through the district office. We provide the principals with the list of the pool, which are the applicants in the pool, and then the principals can go and select folks to interview and place at their discretion.
And so what is the measure of success for an LTDS? Like what, if at the end of the year, right, how do you know if your LTDS is being successful?
That's a great question. What's that? It is a great question. Something we're continuing to look into, and I know that Jack Willis and Paul's shop has been trying to look at that and figure that out. Obviously, we're looking at student outcomes, and that's the biggest thing. But
are you interviewing teachers? Are you asking teachers if, like, pre and post, like, is this a beneficial system of support?
Something that we could do. I know Jill's creeping up. I can hear her shuffling behind me. But you want to talk about the red folders?
I do. Okay. That is a process we're trying to really improve upon. We have a clear job description and job responsibilities. We do our best to vet the candidates to the best of our abilities. And then the principals choose from those candidates that we have. However, once they come into the principal's realm, they, in some cases, don't always stick as closely to the job description and responsibilities as we would prefer. We have them fill out logs every week to let us know how they're spending their time, let us know how often they're in classrooms, how often they're working one-on-one and with teams of teachers, and what that looks like. All of our LTDSs have a red binder that is to document their work. So if you were to go into a school at any time, you could walk into the LTDS's office and say, hey, can I take a look at that red binder that I know that you have? It should have their calendar at the front that they add to it on a weekly basis that shows how they're spending their time. We make sure when we go in there, we check that red binder. We're putting protocols in place that this year, we don't only just take a gander at it, we actually initial it. And when we see things that are going to cause us any concern, we sit down and have a conversation with the principal.
I feel like that's an input, and I'm interested in the output.
And so we're looking at our student data. In the secondary group last year, they all conducted a PDSA cycle. And they collected survey data from teachers in the group that they focused on working with in text-based planning with teams, and then they did a random sampling of students with a survey. So we did that at the beginning of the process and at the end of the process. The data that I wish I had that, I should have brought that with me tonight. We did see change in attitudes of the teachers who participated in that team text-based planning process, and we also saw improvement in student results from those surveys on their experience prior to the text-based planning protocols being put in place and at the end. So we do have that anecdotal data, the output from students. But we are looking closely at student achievement data. We're anxious to get the TN Ready data. We are very anxious to get that to see where we need to really hone in. So we have some indicators already that have let us know that we need to do some pointed supports with some of our folks who are struggling in their buildings for a variety of reasons. So I'm going to turn that over to the two directors who are now in charge of those processes to let them share how they're going to work on that. Thank you for that question.
Thanks. I'm just curious how many people support, how many LTDSs are there?
Just one in every building,
So 168. So how many people support 140 LTDSs? Because that ratio is really important.
Yes, there's 8 at the elementary level and 6 at the elementary level and 3 at the secondary level.
The secondary is middle and high.
Yes, middle and high. So the LTDS is like any teacher or any student, right? There's a spectrum of what they can do and their abilities. And so one thing we're trying this year is to do focused cohort models of support, where the LTDSs will actually be placed through like a cycle of inquiry, where they will choose their focus and their need and then follow it in a cohort model and study it. Do a little bit of peer observations, dig into some strategies. Say you're struggling building some team coherence and getting people on board to even come to the room to plan with you. That might be your focus of study versus collecting data or strategies for writing. So we're going to do a more focused support system for our LTDSs this year and move them through cohort models.
I'm just asking these questions because if literacy is one of the most important things we do, we really have to get this system right, right? Otherwise, we got to figure something out. So my last question, on your teams that are reviewing, like looking at the adoption, are EL teachers and special ed teachers on those teams, not just the advisory, but on the actual
We
selection
didn't place them
team?
on the teams because there's actually small space. There's only 5 committee members, and they span an entire grade band, so kindergarten, first, and second grade. So 5 teachers in that grade band are responsible for looking at all the materials submitted for kindergarten, first, and second grade as a group, and then third, fourth, and fifth. And so we defined it as teachers who spend 50% or more of their instructional time teaching the ELA state standards, and that constitutes eligibility to serve on the committee. But we also knew it was important to have the voice of EL teachers, exceptional education teachers, social emotional learning, principals, LTDS, et cetera, community members. So we wanted to give them voice and representation. And so again, as Jill mentioned, they oversee our process. They're reviewing our training plan. They're reviewing our communication plan. They're looking at our screening instruments. And they are our sounding board and our feedback cycle to make sure that we're doing this right.
I think we all want you to have a full budget to purchase all the textbooks you need. So,
Yeah, and so do our teachers.
yeah.
Ms. Bugs?
I had a few different things, not so much questions, but I wanted to thank you all for that early education summit. This was my second year attending, and I learned so much each time, just the different strategies you all talk about. And it, of course, as a new mom, a young mom, gives me a lot to be thinking about for my own son. So I just appreciate everything that I learned that day. And you all had teachers and coaches and community members there, providers there. It was just, I appreciate that you all are so collaborative and that you are you readily share what you've learned and what those findings were. I do also appreciate when you talk about how to develop proficient readers, and one of the first things you say is a positive culture of learning. Anyone who's ever been in a classroom, especially over the past probably 15 years, understands in Nashville where things have changed so much, students have to be excited to be there. So I appreciate you all wanting to address that. And then saying that students are responsible for the cognitive work in the lesson, that's very powerful, because I remember my first 3 years of teaching, I felt like I was running like a chicken with my head cut off. And I remember actually a literacy coach a literacy coach who I leaned on a lot, even though I was a math teacher, saying to me, a level 5 teacher, a rock star teacher is one who has rock star students, whose students are leading the work and they are being pushed and pressed and encouraged to do the work, and you are more of a facilitator as the teacher. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness of your ideas here. I also wanted to, for me, it's always going to circle back to funding. Everything you said to me sounds like you need more funding. I remember I'm 33, so 29, 28 years ago when I was in early education, I remember all of my teachers always had classroom libraries. That's no longer really a thing. We're depending on the community to help help provide access to books. And we have stuff like Imagination Library where students can build their own libraries at home. But if you don't have a classroom set, if you don't have 100 or so books in your own classroom to choose from, what kind of disservice is this city, is this state, is this country doing for our students, of course, and for our teachers and parents? So I think that's something that we need to continue to push and encourage the community to be outraged about, that we don't have the funding that we need. Read to be ready. I do want at least the viewing public to hear this and hear this well. Dr. Williams being on the A, and some of his team being on that A team that realized, through data that 600 minutes was the sweet spot. 600 minutes over the course of a summer means that you're reading about 20 minutes a day to your child. And I just think that's a really big finding, and I appreciate you all continuing to share that out, but please push that out even more, that parents, even over the summer, instead of having that summer slide where students lose a semester of not thought, but of learning, they instead actually gain at least a month and puts them ahead for the next year. So I just keep pushing that, keep talking about that. And then if you could very briefly tell me about the adoption year. I understand that this is a state issue, that every, 5 years, 5 years that you go through another adoption cycle?
Yeah, the state's shifted back and forth. It should land on 6 years. And 2 years ago, it was science, arts, this year it was social studies and world language. Next year it will be ELA only. The bad news is, I'll go ahead and share it. They're pushing the math back, okay? So we're gonna be at a 9-year gap from the last time we implemented math materials. It'll be pushed back 3 years, and the reason is to create space so that you don't have a heavy purchase with ELA and mathematics back to back, because those are the two biggest purchases the districts will make. So they wanted to create space there and also get back on the standards review cycle. So math standards will be reviewed and revised in the 23-24 school year, and that's when new materials will go in to support the implementation of those new standards. So yes, we're sort of locked into the state adoption cycle, and we follow that process really, really tightly, and I am committed to providing as much transparency about our process for our materials adoption as I can to the board. And tonight was the first step to that, so you know sort of where we are and where we're headed.
So aside from funding, how else can we support you all? What do you need from us?
Ooh. Just the continued advocacy, Ms. Buggs. I appreciate you pointing out that charge to have parents involved and read to their child, read with their children. It's critically important. The funding, of course, is important. I think we feel good about where we are for this year and the choices that we've made strategically to fund the initiatives that we've outlined this year, specifically the anchor text that I talked about. We purchased Q1 and Q2 on last year's money, and we've got to finish Q3 and Q4 with this new money. But other than that, just appreciate the thoughtful questions from all of you and the support and advocacy that you bring to us.
All right, please just keep us posted. And then at next year's summit, if there is another summit, if you could just explain to me how to keep my son from eating his books, that might be helpful.
Learn it any way you can.
Right.
He's internalizing it any way he can.
Thank you, really. This was helpful.
Yeah, so I appreciate this. This is great, guys. As soon as I'm done, I'll come to you. I have your name written down right here, Bush. I always appreciate and hope that there is appreciation for what you're all responsible for, right? And that's the how to get it done, right? The what really does this look like at a very tactical level. And so I appreciate that the high level overview, and this has been said a couple of times here, and I've said this over the 11 years I've been here, is be very clear about what it is that we can do. And how is it that if we're going to go into schools, that we go in there understanding how do we support the strategies and the tactics that are being implemented within the schools, and like not waiting until Read Me Week to go in and read, or how can we encourage the principal and how can we encourage the teachers. So the thing that I do get a little antsy about is, and this is, you've articulated this problem in a way through responding to Ms. Walker's question, right? So you've got 9 LTDSs, right, 6 and 3, for about 140 plus-ish schools. And so I don't know how that ratio was determined. I don't want to know. Don't do that. But the concern becomes if the outcomes aren't what we want them to be, and the ratios weren't where they needed to be, I don't want us to make the hasty decision that the LTDSs were not the right strategy. So we've got to find a way, right, for, I know we've kind of talked out loud and thought out loud about what the rubric looks like to evaluate LTDS effectiveness, but I think that becomes very important from a budgeting perspective, to make sure that, because again, we end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater and shifting, right? So we've had a big shift in approach this year coming up, and then I don't want, then we end up risking seeing another big shift in how we do what we do because we weren't either fully funded or appropriately staffed or didn't think through in early enough about how we assess the effectiveness, right? So the question that ultimately needs to be answered is, do you come back to this board and say, the LTDSs are wonderful, we need more? That's the ultimate, that's the big win in my mind, right? But you got to figure out how to answer the question, were the LTDSs effective? So that's just to put that out there. So I'm curious, and you may not know this now, but in some future presentation, to be very clear about what our targets are for the 2019-2020 year, because I don't think we had this as a part of this presentation yet, right? So what are we really looking for in increases in proficiency? Did I miss that?
That was, we bookended back with Dr. Chingis' presentation.
Oh, he's coming back.
60%. No, ma'am.
Up at the front.
Preceded us, right?
Okay,
60% growth.
Okay.
Every student, every
So that would be him, okay. So those numbers, I'll pull those back in. And what I'm curious about too is, because we've had conversations in the past in the pre-K space, right? Because our concern was we were kicking tail in the pre-K space, right? We had great people, great approaches, kids were getting engaged, and we were touching these kids really, really early, but we were handing them off to maybe not the best K through 2 or K through 3 experience. So I see K data here on that high risk, low risk cohorts. I'm curious, and you may not know off the top of your head, but I'd just like to see in a future project, or just some data, maybe you can email it out, is for those students in those cohorts here, how many of these students have had a pre-K experience with us, right? And so I would love to see this flipped, right? So actually perfectly aligned, that those students who are at a low risk, the majority of those students had a pre-K experience with us, right? So that's my fingers crossed on that one. But I'd like to see that as well. Good. Yeah, so again, just for us, when you come, just clear on what the ask is, because if we're advocating, we want to be very specific. We can always say more money, but then again, being able to tell the story about the high-level strategies you've presented here, how they actually contribute to the targets, and again, is LTD or more LTDSs the answer, and things of that nature. Right? All right, thank you. Ms. Bush?
This is an area that I love, pre-K. My dear colleague next to me, she has so much expertise in elementary, which we bounce off each other about, ideas about literacy. Okay. One day I'm going to have a quote, and at the bottom of it, it's going to say Fran Bush. But this is one of my quotes.
Okay.
Between 0 and 5 is the most important academic foundation a child could have. I'm sorry, let me go back. 0 to 5 is the most important academic foundation a child could have to ensure higher academic success as they move into grade school. Fran Bush.
I agree with you. I sign off on that.
Okay, so how many pre-K classes do we have?
We have 180. We had 187 last year.
Okay.
And next year we'll have 189.
Okay, so 189. That's a lot. That's a lot of pre-K classes. So one of the things that I've done for now 14 years, you probably know, have 5 boys. I got now number 3 going to college this fall. So I have 3 boys in college, yay. But that wasn't easy. It was by design that I had to get them there. So I had to decide on, after the recession took its place, when I got laid off, what was I going to do next? What was I going to do next in my life? Of course, I had lots of babies. So God said, you can teach kids. You can keep kids. You can help other parents, support them on how to get it together for their child so their child can be successful. It wasn't just about my children, it was about their kids too. So in the community, so what I did was I started a child care in my home. Yeah, that was brave, right? Yeah, really brave. And very successful, very successful. My oldest child now that graduated from our program, and I say graduated, is in high school now. I'm not old, but they're getting older, right? You get the message. But what I did was I actually talked with teachers from MNPS because I love some metro schools. And I had teachers that actually dropped their kids off that I cared for. So I asked the tough questions. Tell me what it is that you're missing when kids come to kindergarten. Tell me what it is that you're missing. And they give me a list of things. They can't write, they can't, pre-reading is a struggle, just the basic stuff. Basic, even letters and numbers and things like that. And I thought, okay, well, thank you. So I took all that information and I formed my own curriculum. So now I have a child care academy. And what I do now is I take those little ones between 3 to 5. I start off at 12 months, so 12 months to 5 years old. So I started 12 months to 2 years old. And we do the foundation. We do the letters and numbers and phonics and all that great stuff. And even right down to coloring, because we want those fine motor skills you're talking about, right? That's right. So here we go, 3 years old. Now we're going to do a little bit more rigor with them. And through play, through having that fun of learning. So then now we're starting sight words. We're starting a lot more coloring in the lines. We're starting alphabets. We're starting counting 1 through 100. Vowels, yeah, even that. And they're giving us everything. And you know what else that we do? We send homework home. So that way parents can be accountable as far as supporting their students. And I heard you all say about taking books home and let them read, 20 minutes of reading. 9 times out of 10, they really don't do that because life is busy. But when you say, I have homework for your child, and these are the things that I want you to go over with them, do you know the excitement that comes back through that door? It is incredible. But I start them at 3. 3 to 5. 3 to 5 is it. I've always said between 0 to 5 is your window of opportunity to make sure your child is successful, that they love school. And literacy is amazing. They go get books like they are eating candy. But we have to start preschool. We have to start, and I saw what the presentation here, but sight words through reading and comprehension. Reading and comprehension is huge. Sitting down with those students and you're reading, and that means going to the front, to the cover, to the inside, and you're talking about it, and you're having a conversation with these students. That's what triggered their minds. But we have to start and we have to kind of redevelop on how we're going to get there with our pre-K students. Because by the time they transition into elementary school, guess what? They're sharp. They're sharp, but it starts at that age. And that's where I want to kind of see more like what we're doing, because I do have a student in my child care academy that goes there, but their siblings, and the daughter goes to Cambridge. And Cambridge is not doing half of the things that we're doing in my academy, which you probably could agree with some of the things I'm telling you that we do. So she's questioning, like, I'm so confused. Ashton's getting homework, and daughter is not. And I said, well, that's just a difference. It's okay. You just take what we're giving him, and then they'll work together. But my point of it is that we have to start pre-reading from before kindergarten. And if we start pre-reading before kindergarten, the love of literacy and reading is impactful. And it is powerful. All of my students that graduated from my program, they are in honor classes. They are always on honor roll. They send me Facebook messages, even at 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade now, 10th grade actually, and telling me how academically successful they are because I started them young. And I even have students that come because parents have heard about what I've done with other students because they want them prepared for kindergarten. They're behind. I don't want them to struggle. They don't have confidence. And even at that tender age, they don't have confidence when they know that they don't know something. Kids are very smart. So I want to hear more. I saw just a little piece of the pie as far as how We're working with these pre-K students. And the thing of it is, don't be scared. We have to start putting rigor into our classrooms. Even at pre-K, they're tender, but I'm telling you, they'll give you 100,000%. And that means it has to start at pre-K. One of the things when you were talking about writing, so writing comes with, letters from visual aid. It's all about letters and pushing them to start to put those pieces together. Yeah. And I just don't know if we're doing that in our pre-K programs. And maybe we can, maybe in the future, as you all get through this next school year and start to really look at this, and maybe come up with some more ideas of how we can, because I'm gonna tell you something, it don't cost a lot.
Right.
It don't cost a lot to do what I'm telling you to get these kids successful. Matter of fact, you're gonna laugh at me. One of my favorite stores, Dollar Tree, that's where I go get my workbooks.
Exactly, I've seen
I go get them. And
Now, I
because they
know-
have it, go on, I'm sorry.
I know we gave just a small piece of the puzzle, and I talked about foundational skills, but we definitely do a lot of reading in pre-K. We have shared reading in pre-K where children sit down and listen to and participate in the reading of a story. We have read-alouds in pre-K where the teacher's reading and pulling out vocabulary words and discussing the meaning and what's going on in the story. And you're right, they're talking about the cover of the book and the back of the book, and they're making predictions. So there are a lot more going on in pre-K. I just kind of talked about today about what we were focusing on going forward for 1920 to strengthen foundational skills.
Gotcha. And
But,
also, if we can, I'm not going to tell you do what you do, but I really encourage just some information that can really help. Again, I know we are underfunded. I know you guys need a lot more financial means to be successful in your jobs. But it really doesn't take a lot of money to do these kind of things that really are priceless. And when it comes to writing, we got to get them to start writing. We got to put worksheets in front of them, because I heard we're not doing that. So what we want to do is we want to try to start different things. We want to start to give them a little bit more, expand their horizon. Yeah. Because this is the time. I keep preaching this, and I tell my friends all over the country, if you just follow what I'm telling you to do, if you take my advice and you do exactly what I'm trying to tell you, I promise you the outcome is great. But we have to start now. Pre-K is it. By the time they get to elementary school and middle school, if we don't catch it, they will fail, and they will struggle for the rest of their lives. And I'm telling you, it happens. I've seen it, I've studied it, and it is true. So if we can really focus on that pre-K component, that would be amazing, because we have got to horn in on our pre-K, because our pre-K classes are kind of falling behind. So by the time that elementary kindergarten teachers get them, they're stressed, because there's so many things they have to meet as far as criteria before they enter that kindergarten year. Right. And so that means if we have lots of children that are behind over half the classroom, then how stressful is that? Because they know they have to get those students up to par before they leave for first grade and going into kindergarten. But we have got to make sure that pre-K is so importantly driven with trying to get these pieces together. They can do it. I promise you they can do it. I have proof that these children can do it. I'm doing it right now. I do it every day. I eat, sleep, and breathe it every single day. So just think about some of the different strategies with pre-K teachers. Yes, they gotta play, but they gotta learn. It's gotta be about that learning component. I was sitting here Googling, there was a country that starts their three-year-olds in kindergarten. Three-year-olds, can you believe that? I couldn't find the country. I heard it on TV and almost passed out. I know we're not there, of course. Yeah. But I was just thinking to myself, oh my God, because they're taking it seriously. Other countries are taking this seriously. They're not missing the beat on this. Unfortunately, United States, we're hit and missing on the opportunities. So if you can please take these things into consideration. Look at the kind of things I'm telling you that doesn't cost a lot. It's about just giving them those pieces they can connect, and they're going to be successful. But if we don't give it to them and we let them play all day, and we're not really focusing on really the hard stuff that they really need, then this is the reason why we're going to continue to be at these cohorts, or where we're not being successful in those areas.
And so, Ms. Bush, I would love for you to visit
that was what I was going to say.
early learning centers, or visit any of our sites with me, and let's walk through the curriculum in that day, because I don't want you to leave thinking that that's all they do is play all day. It is not about play. Now they may be playing to build up on a skill,
but they are not, it's not just about play.
Are they writing?
So, yes, and I talked earlier, I did talk about building the strong muscles so they can even begin writing, but they have those tools. What we want to do is buy them tools so that we can put writing, to motivate them to write. So we want to put those things in centers, and so that teachers will have them for small group instruction and whole group instruction. So now I talked a little bit about journals and clipboards and things like that, just to motivate them to write. But there is a whole writing component, and I have our instructional PD person here with me.
Hold on, Dr. Phillips. I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't want to get so deep in the weeds on this right here. Okay, please, God, you're about to scare me.
Yeah, I was not going to call her.
I told y'all about this.
Hold on. I want her to finish my question.
Okay, and so when you're finished responding, I want to go ahead to Mrs. Elrod so she can jump in on this because it's getting late in the hour. So go ahead and respond to that.
Go on.
We can always follow this up with a work session if you really want to share some of the tactics.
Want a work session. I want her to finish now so we can move forward.
Okay, she is. But I do invite you, if you guys want to plan a work session, to bring some more tactical information of what you're actually, how you're doing the work, which is your space.
Yes.
To go ahead and bring that. So continue.
And I want to just make a point real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to Robert's rules. Don't interrupt me when I'm talking and I have someone on the floor. It's not to you. It's to Miss
Dr. Gentry.
Yeah, Miss Gentry over here. So don't do that again. This is important to me. This is important to our district to get this right for our pre-K students. And I'm going to have the floor and talk. However long it takes, I'm going to continue this. All right, you can go on.
Well, I was just saying, I know that our professional development instructional leader is back there shaking because I'm sure she has a lot to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I certainly encourage you to come with us and let's schedule a visit so we can just walk through what happens during the day of a pre-K student.
Absolutely, I would love that. And who else wanted to, who else wanted to say something? Okay, and we'll get together on that.
Okay.
And I'll be able to coordinate that with you and about doing a walkthrough. But I just want you to know that I take this very seriously because this is important. Pre-K is very important, and I make it very clear. This is how we bridge the gap, and this is how we move forward so we won't have such a deficiency in literacy. So I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Elrod?
Hey, I too agree that pre-K is important. That's why I was glad that Dr. Gentry asked, and I look forward to seeing the results of how many of these students were our pre-K students, because I have a feeling that it's going to help us in the blue area is my hope. And on that note, so I am glad to hear that we're doing the clay and pincher grip and fine motor skills as a pre-learning part to reading. I know that that's part of Handwriting Without Tears as well, which I know is part of our programs that we use in the pre-K department. I, like Mrs. Spearing, in my past first grade classrooms and kindergarten classrooms, I too did the writing prompt where you draw a picture and whether it's prompted by a doodle or whether it's just free draw, but not all students can draw a picture. An example, one of my children is one of those children that can't do that. He's 4. They both turn 5 actually, guys, because they're twins. They turn 5 on Thursday, and he's exceptionally he's great. Like he reads very well. He does decoding. He's doing all of that thing, but he has a terrible grasp of any kind of writing utensil. And we are privileged that we have OT and we've been able to pay for that, and we have those people that are working with him, but there's not that accessibility to all students, particularly with TEIS services stopping at age 3. So my question, I guess, is regarding to like my son, who is got all of these services because we have paid for them and we are proactive in those ways. If you have a student that comes into kindergarten that is still having those types of struggles, are those interventions, are they only provided in pre-K, or are those expanded into kindergarten and first grade through these LTDSs? So we can get back to those like fundamentals of starting off on the right foot and going ahead.
Thank you for that question. The supports continue throughout, and they're reevaluated as the year goes along. So it's not just in kindergarten, but they continue to reevaluate the student to see if they still need those supports, but they do continue.
Okay, great. I mean, one of my boys will draw you pictures all day long. The other one would rather read you books all day long. My follow-up question as well is about the $7 to $8 million for all K through 12 literacy materials that we're expecting for next year. Is that $7 to $8 million for classroom sets again, or is that for a book for each student?
That would be to fully fund all the materials for every student, every teacher.
Perfect. So that's what the number that we're asking for.
That's the number that we have preliminarily been given by the State Department, at a rate of anywhere from $120 to $140 per student. So we multiply that by our student population. That's what gets us around the $8 million.
Got it. I'm glad to know that we're not asking for classroom sets. Thank you. Ms. Rogue?
I don't want to keep you all standing. I just got one quick question. So CKLA has been a controversial issue for us because a lot of veteran teachers were upset with the what they called canned curriculum. Are we continuing CKLA?
CKLA is in our district in two fronts. One is through the priority schools, and one is through our study with FSU. So again, back to Ms. Walker's question, we do have some quality issues with our curriculum that was adopted in 2014, and that was Journeys. And so there was an appetite for stronger materials, and that's where CKL entered. And there was an opportunity with the research project and also the priority schools. They have a little more flexibility and autonomy to purchase materials. And so the idea was, can we have materials that close the gap from where we were 3 years ago, getting ready for this adoption cycle? So there are 24 schools in the CKLA study. With FSU, 12 of them are control, 12 of them are treatment. I have expressed concerns both to our staff, our central office staff, and the researchers, because I brought this up on a planning phone call a year ago that said that your third year of your study will be our first year of implementation of new materials. And if we don't choose CKLA, we're going to have an issue. And that is still true. I met with Lacey Noel, she's the state textbook director, and she said if CKLA is not on the state list, you will not be able to continue in the study. So given the control schools had the option to continue to implement the materials and a lag behind year of the treatment. 9 out of the 12 opted not to. I think there was some misunderstanding about whether or not they had to, and we clarified for them on a phone call and through a series of emails that they have the option not to do that. And like I said, 9 out of 12 of the control schools decided not to. The 3 that decided to are actually priority schools, interestingly enough. There was some concerns also that came to my attention about how the study was implemented and introduced. Dr. Changis's team, the Research Assessment and Evaluation team, they have a rigorous system where all the research is reviewed. So it goes through a process to look at the design methodology, the outcomes, the benefit, the time and opportunity costs that it takes to implement the study. And that particular study bypassed that committee, and it was implemented, circumvented that process. And that's how we ended up with where we are in the CKLA study. But we did have a 3-year agreement nonetheless. And so it will continue at least for the next year. Again, we're still waiting to see what's available on the state list. If CKLA is not on the state list, we cannot continue with it.
Okay, so one of the complaints that I heard about CKLA is that the schools, and I think that's what you're saying, the schools did not want to, some of them did not necessarily want to do the study, but in order to be in the study, they had to voluntarily be in the study. However, they were told they had to.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. That's a concern. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Frobe.
Right.
That's a concern that again was raised again with bypassing Dr. Changis's committee, and that several principals that I have spoken to either directly in person, on the phone, and email have expressed concerns that they were not given the option to participate. Now, the unfortunate reality is that's where we are, and this was unbeknownst to the research team, so it puts us and the research team in a real bind, given we're already a year into the study, 1 out of 3 years that we're into the study.
So this does not happen, that we have studies that are done that aren't actually vetted by the research team? Is this like?
I think this is an exceptional circumstance, but typically know, and again, Dr. Chinggis I know is here, but they do have a rigorous, robust vetting process for all research that's done, including dissertations from Trevecca, research from major universities, anything from Vanderbilt, obviously, or anything anywhere across the country, including the one from FSU, should have gone through that vetting process. This particular one did not.
Yes, we had a presentation in December that was pretty controversial, and I called it a dog and pony show, which was an issue, and it appears that it was a dog and pony show if it was not properly vetted through our channel. So that's all.
Any other questions for our presenters?
Can I make one comment?
Go right ahead.
When we were in budget season, and there was, I was surprised at how many teachers contacted me to say, get rid of LTDSs. And I was like, no, we need LTDSs, meeting coaches. And I asked questions about why do you feel that way? What's going on? And what I heard was that they weren't impacted by the LTDSs. And I know you and I talked about this, David, but is there any conversation about allowing the LTDSs to work with students in the schools? And there's some students that have difficulty and they may need more than an interventionist is able to give, or they may need more than a classroom teacher is able to provide with that first instruction. And if they are able to, if the reading coach is able to support that student, then the teacher says, hey, would you come in here and help me teach me what you did? And then there's that enthusiasm again where the teacher wants to learn more from the reading coach. And it just feels like a win-win to me. So anyway, I don't know if there's any discussion of that at this point, or maybe there will be in the future.
No, I think it's a great question for us to consider how we're best strategically deploying the resources and staffing that we have. The LTDS is defined, as Jill said, we have a very clear and specific job description to coach teachers. And so if I'm at elementary school, I'm responsible for kindergarten through fourth grade literacy. Now, we define we expand literacy not just to be ELA, right? But they should be including literacy strategies in social studies, science, mathematics across the curriculum. So that's number one. But I would also say that there are other positions that could be leveraged more of what you're saying, like a reading specialist, a reading interventionist, a multi-classroom leader. There are other job classifications that could actually do the specific work that you do. But with the student-based budgeting formula, a principal would have to allocate specific dollars to fund a position that could work with teachers and kids in a different capacity. But I think going forward, having the conversation about LTDS, and their ability to work with students, not just in a modeling or a co-teaching setting, but other ways might be something we could explore.
Any other questions or concerns? Well, thank you all so very much. Anytime I see presenters, especially like you all with your master's and doctorate degrees, and you were former teachers, I appreciate that. And I did research with NASA, and I still am anxious to hear from you all about what it takes to get little people to read. So just thank you for this presentation. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you all.
Yes, and again, thank you to the team for your hard work and your focus for this upcoming school year, and we'll look forward to updates as the year progresses, given the goals that we have in front of us. So thank you.
So I guess we are ready for announcements. We'll begin on this end with Mrs. Bush.
I have none.
Mrs. Spearing, Mrs. Elrod, Mrs. Poopa Walker.
I want to welcome Dr. Griffin and Hank Clay to the team. Thank you for joining us.
Mrs. Frog, I feel like I had one.
You said it with the pre-K thing.
Oh, I do just have one question or one request of the team for the August meeting, and I'll put this formally in writing, but some Edge Hill neighbors have reached out to me about Belmont building on the Rose Park site, and the November board meeting where we voted to allow them to do so, and just to, if you would be willing and prepared to kind of present to us what's happening, what kind of access the community will have to that, to that facility coming in August, and I'll circle back with you if that's all right. Thank you. You got anything? All right, Ms. Rhodes?
There being no further business, this meeting's adjourned.
Yeah.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.